I didn't believe in the woods until they stared back at me. Not metaphorically. I mean it. I mean the night itself blinked. When you've been camping in a Volkswagen for most of your adult life, the road starts to feel like your spine. Every bend, every crack, familiar, even comforting. You learn to trust yourself. You learn to listen. But some places teach you that not every silence is peaceful. Some silences are full of teeth. It started with a postcard. I was in Barstow, cooling off after a 4-day haul through the Nevada desert. My 87 Westphalia, her name's Eloise, had held up surprisingly well despite the radiator hiccup outside Tonopah. I was sipping a gas station coffee that tasted vaguely of mildew when I noticed it sitting on the community corkboard. A faded postcard of Angela's National Forest, tucked behind a dog-walking flyer and a Cash for Junk Cars business card. It was the picture that caught me. Not the forest, but the date. 1976. The ink had bled out with time, but I could still make out what it said. For those who forget the woods never forget you. No return address, no name. Just that. I took it as a sign. I've been that kind of person since the accident, looking for symbols, patterns in the mess. And maybe that's my curse. Maybe I should have ignored it. But 2 days later, I found myself winding up the Angeles Crest Highway, Eloise humming beneath me, trees growing taller, tighter, like ribs around a heart. You ever notice how the forest gets darker even when the sun's still out? I pulled into Buckhorn Campground around 5:45 p.m. It was late October, off-season, quiet. Only one other vehicle in the loop, a black Sprinter van with no plates and windows so tinted they looked like holes in the world. I parked Eloise 2 sites down. I always gave people space, not just for me, for them too. Campgrounds do something strange to time. You can see someone 3 feet away and still feel completely alone, or watched. As I started setting up, I noticed something strange. There were no birds, no squirrels, not even wind. Just this heavy, bloated, quiet pressing down like a sleep paralysis blanket. You don't realize how much you rely on background noise until it's gone. You don't notice your heartbeat until it's the only thing you hear. I told myself it was just elevation, just the forest adjusting my expectations. But I'd camped higher. I'd camped colder. This wasn't weather. That night, I made a small fire, cooked up some lentils on the camp stove, cracked open a beer. The air had that crisp, high-altitude smell, but it was too still, like the forest was holding its breath. Around 10:15 p.m., I heard the first knock. It came from behind me, 3 slow knocks, not woodpecker fast, not animal scatter random, just knock, knock, knock. I froze, beer halfway to my lips. It wasn't close, maybe 50 yards into the tree line, but it wasn't natural either. I called out a dumb, instinctual hello and listened. Nothing. I went inside Eloise, locked the doors, and laid on my side with the curtains slightly cracked. That's when I noticed the Sprinter van was gone. I hadn't heard an engine. No headlights. Just gone. The next morning, there were boot prints outside my door, barely visible in the pine dust, but they were there. Human. Big. Maybe a man size 12. They walked right up to my sliding door, stood for a while, then turned back toward the forest. I didn't leave. I know. But part of me thought I was overreacting. I chalked it up to a night hiker or some weirdo with poor social skills. Happens. Not everyone goes camping for the same reasons. Some people run towards something, others away. That day, I stayed near camp, read a book, doodled, but something was gnawing at me, even as I tried to ignore it. Around 3 p.m., I decided to hike the Waterman Mountain Trail, just to get my legs moving, clear my head. It was a well-marked trail, nothing technical. But maybe a half-mile in, I found something that stopped me cold. A blue flannel shirt, ripped at the collar, weathered, lying in a heap beside the trail. And beneath it, half buried in dry pine needles, a driver's license. The name was faded, the picture sun-bleached to almost nothing, but the expiration date, 1977. I left it there. I don't know why. Some gut instinct told me not to touch it. Just back away, walk slowly, and not think too hard. That night, I parked Eloise facing out, just in case. I left the driver's seat empty and slept in the back, my camping knife tucked under my pillow, every nerve in my body tuned like a live wire. Around midnight, I heard the knocking again, but this time it came from both sides. Left side, 3 knocks, pause. Right side, 3 knocks. Same rhythm, deliberate, like they were talking to each other. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then silence. And then something worse. Laughter. But not loud, not joyous, just a thin, gasping chuckle, like someone trying to laugh with a collapsed lung. It circled the van once, slow, dragging feet through the gravel. I saw no shadow, no silhouette, just the noise. I sat there for hours, frozen, praying for sunrise. I didn't sleep. When light finally broke over the ridge, I opened the door and nearly collapsed with relief. Nothing, no prints, no signs, just the forest, yet pretending it had done nothing wrong. I left that morning, packed up so fast I left my folding chair behind. Didn't even notice until I was halfway down the mountain. But as I passed the turnout before the last bend, I saw the Sprinter van again, parked in the shadows, no plates, and this time a figure was standing beside it, tall, still, dressed in that same torn blue flannel. I didn't stop, didn't look again, just drove. But that wasn't the end. 3 weeks later, I got a letter, no return address, just my name, in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a photo of me, standing beside Eloise, that first night at Buckhorn, fire glowing, beer in hand. It was taken from the trees. I didn't remember anyone taking a photo. That night, I was alone. The only camera I'd seen was the one I carried, and it hadn't left my pack. But this photo, it was taken from high up, like someone had been crouched in the trees or maybe even climbed one. It was angled downward as if they were studying me, framing me. The focus was perfect, centered on my head, my shoulders. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking into the fire mid-smile, like I didn't know something awful was already watching. I sat with the photo for a long time, trying to talk myself out of what it meant. My first instinct was to rationalize, maybe a park ranger with a trail cam, maybe some curious backpacker playing a joke. But my name was on the envelope. No address, no postmark, no smudging, like someone had placed it in a mailbox with surgical precision. I felt sick. It was like opening a window and realizing the air inside your house had been breathed by someone else. That's when I started digging. I reached out to a friend, Casey, a Forest Service volunteer I'd met during a wildfire cleanup in Big Sur. She knew the Angeles National Forest better than anyone I trusted. When I told her what happened, she didn't laugh. She didn't even sound surprised. I was wondering when someone would come to you, she said, and I swear I felt my blood stop moving. Come to me? There was a long pause on the line. People go missing up there more than they should. Not like off trail, lost in the wilderness, missing. I mean gone. No scent trail, no gear. Just not there anymore. Isn't that true for all national parks? I asked. Sure, she said, but not all of them have a trail with no record. That's when she told me about something locals call Dead Sleep Hollow. Not a tourist name, not on any maps, just an old term passed between rangers and fire crews. Supposedly, it's a small glen somewhere northwest of Waterman Mountain, but no trail leads to it, and those who do find it, well, they usually don't come back. Or when they do, they don't come back the same. She said the story goes all the way back to the Tongva people. They spoke of a place in the mountains where the land would turn away from the sun. Not just dark, but wrong. They avoided it, warned against even naming it. Of course, I didn't believe in curses. I believed in cold nights and bad luck. But then she said this: 3 disappearances last year, 2 hikers and 1 camper, all registered at Buckhorn, all last seen near the Waterman Trailhead, all on the same week in October. The week I was there. I hung up soon after. Casey promised to email me some archived ranger notes, but when I checked back later, the email bounced. Her number too. Disconnected. Just like that, gone. And then the dream started. It began subtle, just glimpses. Trees swaying in ways trees shouldn't, too slowly, like they were breathing. I'd wake with the taste of pine needles in my mouth, sometimes a scratch on my arm I couldn't explain. But then came the dream that split me open. I was in my van, asleep. Everything looked normal, except the forest outside was wrong. Too still, too perfect. The trees were evenly spaced, too symmetrical, like they'd been planted with intention, and every one of them had a face. Not bark, not carved. Real faces, stretched over the trunks like wet skin, eyes half shut, mouths slack. In the dream, I opened the van door, and all the trees turned to look at me. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. Eloise's side mirror was twisted backward, like someone had grabbed it. There were pine needles inside the driver's seat, though I hadn't opened that door in days. I didn't sleep the next night, didn't sleep the next 5. I kept driving. Washington, Oregon, Utah. But it followed me. Not the knocking, not the laughter. Something quieter, like a hum under the surface of my thoughts. I couldn't hear it, but I could feel it. Like knowing there's a spider somewhere in your clothes, but not being able to find it. I finally broke down in a Walmart parking lot in Salt Lake City. Middle of the night, fluorescent lights flickering above. I'd pulled out the old photo again, the one from Buckhorn. But this time, I noticed something new. In the background, just barely visible through the trees, a second figure. Blurred, half hidden behind a pine trunk. Head turned, eyes glowing faintly from the firelight. Watching me. I hadn't seen it before. Maybe I didn't want to. But there it was. Someone or something had been standing there the whole time. Not just watching, but waiting. And I knew, deep in the pit of me, I hadn't left Buckhorn. Not really. Part of me was still up there, stuck, like the forest had taken a piece and refused to give it back. I decided to return. I know how that sounds. Insane. But I needed closure. I needed to know I wasn't hallucinating, that I hadn't spiraled into some forest-fueled psychosis. I had to go back, or I'd never sleep again. It was late November by then. Snow had started to dust the ridges. I parked Eloise at the same site. I brought no firewood, no food, just cameras, motion sensors, my old CB radio, and a copy of that photo pinned to the dashboard. As night fell, I sat there in the driver's seat, staring into the trees. "Whatever you are," I whispered, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." But that was a lie. The lie didn't hold for long. By 9 p.m., the cold had already seeped through the seams of Eloise's insulation, threading through the floorboards like it was alive, like it wanted to find me. My breath fogged in front of me. I kept the headlights off, every curtain pulled back. I wanted to see everything. I told myself that was smart, but really it was fear, real fear, not the kind that shouts, the kind that waits, that knows its timing. Outside, the forest stood still, poised like it was about to say something. Then, tap, right side. Window height. I turned my head slowly. Nothing. Then, tap, the other side. The passenger window, fast, like fingers, like it wanted me to react. I didn't move, not at first. I reached for the camera on the dash, powered it on without turning on the screen. I'd rigged a little hack to record with no light, no flash, just ambient pickup. I set it on the ledge and waited. Silence, and then a voice. Not a growl, not a scream, just a whisper. So soft I didn't believe I'd heard it. My name, Caleb, drawn out, low, like a memory dredged from the bottom of a frozen lake. No one alive should have known that name. Not here, not after all this time, not after what happened to my brother. That's what broke something inside me. That one word, that voice like cracked bone, because I hadn't told anyone. Not Casey. Not anyone I'd met on the road. My twin brother, Micah, we'd camped together once when we were 18. Angeles, same area. He vanished. No one found his pack. No prints, just gone between one heartbeat and the next. I'd always told people it was a drowning in Big Bear. But that was the lie. This was the truth. And the forest knew. The camera made a soft click, motion detected. I grabbed it, flipped the screen. There, caught in a few blurry frames, was him, Micah, or something wearing his face. Standing where the fire pit used to be, arms hanging low, shoulders hunched like a marionette with slack strings. His face was wrong, not twisted, not monstrous, just still, like a wax museum version, posed mid-expression, frozen. The eyes weren't right either. They weren't Micah's eyes. They were mine. I dropped the camera. The forest laughed, not from one place, from everywhere. The trees, the wind, the soil. Like it wasn't in the forest, it was the forest. And I cracked. I kicked open the door and ran. No flashlight, no phone, just instinct and memory. Back to the Waterman trailhead. My boots barely touched the ground. I don't even remember breathing. All I knew was I had to get to the flannel, to the place where the license had been, like it was a doorway or maybe a scar, and if I could just tear it open, I reached the clearing, and the world dropped out. The trees shifted, bent. The stars overhead twisted like water being stirred. The silence grew so loud it made my ears bleed. My legs stopped moving, not from fear, but because I physically couldn't. The air was thick like syrup, like memory. And in front of me, kneeling in the dirt, was Micah. His head was bowed, his hands limp in his lap. I fell to my knees, choking. Micah? He looked up and smiled, but it wasn't a smile of reunion. It was pity. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, just a single pine needle drifting down from his lips like ash. Then he stood and turned away and walked into the trunk of a tree. I swear to you, I watched it happen. The bark didn't crack. It didn't part. He just sank into it like water through soil. Then everything snapped back. Sound, wind, stars. I was alone again. I staggered back to the van somehow. I don't remember the walk. Just the way my fingers trembled so badly I couldn't fit the key into the ignition for 10 full minutes. When I finally got Eloise to start, I drove until the gas light blinked red. I didn't care where I was, didn't stop, didn't look back. I didn't go to the cops. What would I say? What did I think of Forest? The forest showed me my dead brother and laughed? No, I just ran. But something changed that night. Something got in. Ever since, I see things out the corner of my eye, reflections that don't match, shadows that pause when they should sway. I haven't stayed in a national park since. I sleep in grocery store lots, gas station pullouts, desert washes. But it doesn't matter where I go. I still hear the knocks. 3, always 3. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I feel the cold settle against my back. I hear leaves crunch slow and deliberate. And I know something is standing behind me. Something that remembers my name, something that wears my brother's face. Sometimes I wonder if I ever left the forest at all. If maybe what I call the world now, these grocery store parking lots, these nameless towns, these cold humming highways, isn't outside the forest, but somewhere inside it. Just another loop, another hallucination. Like the forest let me go because it knew I'd carry it with me. I've tried to make sense of it. God knows I have. I've read every fringe forum, spoken in cryptic DMs with so-called experts, rangers, folklorists, survivalists. Some of them believe what I saw. Most don't, and a few told me I'd better shut up and forget it, that it was best to move on. But how do you forget something that stares at you through your own reflection? How do you move on when every rustle of leaves, every snap of a dry twig makes your whole body flinch like it remembers something your mind won't let you recall? I've tried to rationalize it. Trauma, isolation, the echo chamber of a lonely road trip gone too long. But it never fits, not completely, because trauma doesn't whisper your name through the trees. It doesn't leave a photo in your mailbox, and it doesn't wear your brother's face. And lately, it's been getting bolder. 2 weeks ago, I was parked just off Route 66 near a dried-up campground east of Barstow. It was hot, bitter, angry heat. No shade, no trees, just sunburnt earth and skeletal brush. I thought finally I was somewhere it couldn't follow. Somewhere the forest had no grip. And yet, just past midnight, I smelled pine. Sharp, fresh, out of place. I stepped outside, nothing. But when I opened the rear of the van to grab water, I found something resting on the bed. A branch, not broken, cut clean, precise, like it had been pruned by hand. The needles were still green. I was 400 miles from the nearest pine grove. I didn't sleep. I drove west until the sun came up. And that's when it hit me. This thing, this force, this intelligence inside the Angeles, it doesn't live there. It hunts there. The way sharks use shallow waters, the way spiders pick the corners of quiet rooms, it waits because it doesn't need to chase. It just needs you to stay long enough, doubt long enough, forget long enough. And then it starts to shape the world around you, just enough to make you question what's real. And once you question that, it has you. I think now about how many other people it's touched. How many campers, hikers, van lifers thought they just got lost? How many went missing without a trace? No blood, no prints, no fight, just gone, as if the forest had absorbed them. And the rangers, they know, at least some of them do. I spoke to one, off the record. He was retired, which probably saved me from being reported. He'd worked the Angeles district for over 30 years. Told me he never hiked alone, even in daylight. That some places weren't meant to be walked twice. Sometimes, he said, the forest remembers you, and if it does, it wants something back. I asked him what it wanted. He just shook his head. Whatever you brought in. I didn't understand then, but I think I do now. It's not about who you are, it's about what you carry, your guilt, your loss, your secrets. The forest is drawn to the parts of you you try to bury, the weight you pretend isn't there. And if it finds them, it gives them shape, gives them voice. That's why it used Micah, not just because I loved him, but because I never forgave myself. He was the one who wanted to go off trail that night, yes? But I was the one who let him. I had the compass, I had the map. And when he said, it'll be fine, I said, yeah, screw it. Because I wanted to be wild. I wanted the story. And now I live in the aftermath of that story, in the echo chamber of what we lost. And the forest knew. It fed on that. That's why I'm telling this now. Not to warn you, because warning implies you can do something about it. No. I'm telling you because someone needs to remember, because the forest erases. It doesn't just take you. It takes the record of you, the memory, the evidence. Like water over stone, it wears down your presence until even the people who once loved you can't quite remember your face. And that's the worst part of it all. Not dying, not even being watched. It's being forgotten. And if I go missing, if one day this channel goes silent and Eloise is found parked on some remote pullout with no trace of me, know this. It wasn't an accident. I didn't fall. I didn't wander too far. I looked into something that doesn't like being seen. And I remembered. That's why it's coming. And if you're hearing this, it might be coming for you too. Not today. Not tonight. But maybe next fall, when the air smells like pine and you're sure you're alone in the woods. You won't hear it, not at first. Maybe just a knock. Maybe just a photo in a place it shouldn't be. Maybe a whisper of your name in a voice you thought was long gone. And when it comes, don't run, don't scream. And whatever you do, don't look into the trees. Because if you see it, it sees you. I used to think horror was a thing that happened to you. Like a car crash or a storm, something you could point to, name, move past. But the truth is, real horror grows with you. It folds into your skin. It whispers itself into the space between your thoughts. You learn to smile again. Sure, you laugh, you live. But it's there, quiet, still, watching. I never told my parents what really happened to Micah. They couldn't have handled it. They already blamed themselves, said they should have stopped us, should have insisted we take phones or a satellite radio or a guide. But it wouldn't have mattered because this thing doesn't chase its victims. It chooses them. Micah was the first one chosen, maybe not the last. And I was left behind, maybe as a warning, maybe as a message, or maybe as a mistake. But I think I know what it really was now. A trade. The forest took him and left me with the weight. Because some of us don't vanish. Some of us stay, haunted, hollowed, carriers of the story. Because the story matters. The truth matters. There are forces in this world we weren't meant to name, and places in this country where the ground remembers what was done to it. Places soaked in old pain, old blood, old screams. And the Angeles, especially the deepest, oldest parts, are full of it. Not just disappearances. Not just the missing hikers or the vague ranger reports or the half-hearted rescue missions that get shut down before they really begin. I'm talking about a history the park doesn't print on the welcome brochures. Whole families erased, cabins gone without a trace, maps that don't match the land, local tribes that warned for generations about a hunger in the trees, warnings we paved over, romanticized, turned into bedtime stories. We named it wilderness. We called it untouched, but something touched it first, and it's still there, still watching. Every time you step off trail, every time you say it's just 10 more minutes to the ridge, every time you dismiss the unease in your gut as nerves or paranoia, you are heard. You are seen. And maybe that's what finally breaks me, the knowing, the certainty that no matter how far I drive, no matter how long I stay awake, how many lights I keep on, it will find me again. Because it already has me. Because some part of me never left that clearing. Some part of me is still kneeling in the dirt, watching my brother disappear into a tree. I don't film much anymore. The camera feels like a lie. Like it could never capture what I saw. Not really. Not the weight of it. Not the silence before the scream. But I still talk, still tell the stories, because they matter. Because maybe someone hears them, someone like you, and decides not to camp at Waterman Ridge. Or maybe they do go, but they bring something more than bear spray, something ancient, something respectful. Because here's the final truth I've learned. It's not just fear that keeps the forest alive, it's forgetting. And stories, real stories, they are memory-made armor. They are the flame against the cold. So remember this, remember me. Not as the guy who disappeared or cracked or rambled too long into a microphone, but as the one who came back, the one who saw it and still walked out, because maybe, just maybe, that means you can too. If you listen, if you watch, if you remember that the woods are not empty, they are full of silence, of history, of things with faces like yours and voices like mine, and they are always, always waiting. So when you camp, camp with reverence, and if you hear a knock in the night, don't open the door, don't speak, don't move. Just listen and pray it passes by, because if it doesn't, you won't vanish. You'll become part of it. And the next voice someone hears in the trees might be yours. I never thought a place so wide and open could feel like a closed hand around my throat. But the first time I pulled my old Volkswagen Westphalia into Angelina National Park, I knew in the marrow of my bones that I'd stepped to something I couldn't fully understand. It was late September, the last shreds of summer heat trapped in the dry grass, and the air was neither warm nor cold, but charged as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me to notice the truth buried beneath the pines. My name is Carter Hale. I'm 34, born in Oregon but raised in Texas, and I've been driving this van across the country for 7 years. Collecting stories, collecting scars. This one is the only story I tell with my voice lowered to a whisper, as if saying it too loud might remind whatever's out there that I got away. I'd been on the road for 16 days already, heading east from the New Mexico border, my German shepherd Sloane, riding shotgun. She was getting old, but she still had a protective gleam in her eye that made me feel safer than I deserved to feel. The plan was simple. A 2-night stay at a primitive campground on the south side of the park. No electricity hookups, no cell service. Just the hum of cicadas and the pale glow of lantern light. I thought it would be peaceful. I thought it would feel like freedom. But there's a special kind of dread that waits for you when you think you've escaped everything else. It's the dread that rises up when you realize you might be alone with something older and crueler than you can imagine. The ranger at the front gate was a man named Wallace, tall, brittle, all bones under his uniform. He looked me over the way you look over a stranger who might ask for help you don't have. His voice was low when he handed me my permit and map. "You camping alone?" he asked, though Sloane was clearly visible on the passenger seat. I told him yes, just me and the dog. He nodded without smiling. "If you hear anything at night, anything that sounds like a woman calling for help, don't answer. Don't go looking." I waited for the smirk that would tell me he was joking, but there wasn't one. Just that flat, dusty gaze. "You understand me?" I told him I did. He tucked the map into my hand and walked away without saying another word. I tried to laugh it off as I pulled forward, but Sloane's ears flattened against her skull, and she gave a soft, unhappy whine. The tires crunched over gravel as I drove deeper into the trees, and with every turn of the road, the forest seemed to crowd closer to the van, as if the pines were leaning in to study me. I'm not superstitious, I never have been. But that first hour in Angelina, I started to feel something watching from just beyond the edges of my vision, never moving, never blinking. I kept telling myself it was just the quiet, just the isolation. But deep down, I knew better. I set up camp in Site 14, the last spot before the old fire road curved into a stand of blackened stumps from a wildfire 30 years past. The site was nothing special, just a ring of rocks for a fire, a splintered picnic table, and a patch of dirt large enough to park the van. I killed the engine and listened to the sudden hush that fell over everything. No engines, no human voices, just the hush and the rasp of my own breath. Sloane refused to get out at first. She stayed pressed against the passenger door, hackles raised. When I clipped on her leash and coaxed her down, she moved in jerks, her nose low to the ground, as if she were tracking something she couldn't see. That first evening, I cooked a can of chili over my camp stove and tried to read, but my eyes kept sliding over the same sentence. Twilight settled in with a peculiar heaviness. You know how dusk usually feels like a soft surrender? Here it felt like a slow tightening, a contraction of the light until the darkness pressed against the skin. Every so often I would hear a sound from the tree line, a brittle snapping or a low groan like an old barn shifting its weight. I kept telling myself it was just the forest cooling, just the natural decay of old limbs. But around midnight, as I sat with my lantern casting thin yellow circles across the dirt, I heard something that didn't fit any natural pattern. A woman's voice, far away but clear, calling, help. Just that word, dragged out on a ragged exhale. Sloane's head shot up. She growled, a low, vibrating sound I'd never heard from her before. I felt my mouth go dry. Every part of me wanted to stand up and look, to walk to the tree line and call back, because it sounded so real. But Wallace's voice came back to me, cold and certain. Don't answer. Don't go looking. So I stayed put. I turned off the lantern and sat in the dark, my hand buried in the warm fur at Sloane's neck, and listened as the voice called again, this time closer. Help. Just the one word, but the syllables cracked in the middle, like whoever was speaking couldn't quite keep their shape. My chest felt tight. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine 100 rational explanations, but none of them held water. I was too aware of the way the darkness pressed against the van like a tide rising up around me. When the voice called a third time, right behind the van, I thought my heart was going to tear itself out of my ribs. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Sloane trembled under my hand, and in that moment I knew with perfect clarity that if I turned on my lantern and opened the door, I would see something standing there watching me with no eyes at all. Time stretched out, warped into something I couldn't measure. Eventually the voice stopped. The air around the van lightened a little, as if some enormous pressure had been released. I counted to 100 in my head, but nothing else moved. No footsteps, no more voices, just the rasp of the pines in the wind. When dawn finally came, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like a temporary reprieve, as if the thing that had called to me had simply slipped back between the trees to wait. My hands were still shaking as I boiled water for coffee. I tried to tell myself I'd imagined everything, that sleep deprivation and too many nights alone had finally cracked my sense of reality. But Sloane's refusal to leave the van told me I hadn't been the only one who heard it. I didn't pack up right away. Part of me was determined to stay, to prove to myself that I wasn't afraid. But the truth was, I was afraid. I was more afraid than I'd ever been. Not because something had happened, but because something had almost happened, and because whatever it was hadn't finished with me yet. I told myself I'd stay another night, that I'd face it down, that fear was just a sensation, not a reason. But by mid-afternoon, the temperature had shifted. The wind changed directions. It was sudden, unnatural. A warm gust rolled through the campsite, carrying with it the scent of rot, wet leaves, stale water, and something beneath it that I can only describe as wrong. like a forgotten room that had been locked up too long. It clung to the air and to me. Sloane paced, not aimlessly. No, she moved with purpose, circling the van in wide loops, nose low, ears pinned. She kept glancing up at the tree line, that line where sunlight stopped filtering through the canopy as if the forest had drawn a boundary. She didn't want to cross it. Neither did I. But I made the mistake of wandering. There was a narrow trail near Site 14, barely more than a game path, disappearing east into denser brush. I told myself I just wanted to stretch my legs, maybe find a good overlook. I brought my camera and a bottle of water and whistled for Sloane, but she wouldn't come. She just stood there, whining, staring at me like I was walking into a burning house. I told her I'd be back in an hour. She sat down at the bumper and watched me disappear into the trees. The path wound tighter than I expected. Every turn felt like a trick. After 10 minutes, I was deeper than I'd planned, with no view of the sky, just the canopy closing in like a rib cage. The forest was too quiet, not peacefully quiet, oppressively so. No birdsong, no insects, just the soft shuffle of my boots and the occasional crack of something shifting, far off in a direction I couldn't name. Then the smell returned, that same spoiled, earthy scent, only stronger now. It hit like a wave. I stopped walking. My vision tilted like the world had been gently turned on its side. I knelt down, trying to clear my head, and that's when I noticed it. The scratch marks. They weren't on the ground. They were on the trees. Thin, deep grooves etched into the trunks. Not claw marks, not from any animal I've seen, but straight lines, vertical, evenly spaced, like someone had dragged a rusted rake down each tree one by one just above eye level. Not once, not randomly, dozens of trees. The marks were old, but not ancient. Sap still bled from a few of them. My stomach dropped. Something about them felt ritualistic. Deliberate. I turned back. I didn't run, but every step away from those trees felt like a stolen one, like I was retreating from something that had seen me, something that didn't want me to leave. That feeling clung to my spine all the way back to the van. When I emerged at the edge of the site, Sloane jumped down from the bumper and bolted straight to me, barking once sharply, like she was trying to wake me up from something. I made myself a fire that night, not for warmth, but for protection. The flames felt like the only boundary I could trust. I moved the van so it faced the trail. If something came out of that brush, I wanted to see it coming. As night fell, the wind died. The forest held its breath again, and then came the sound. It wasn't a voice this time. It was knocking, soft, measured knocks. 3 beats, pause, 3 again, coming from the woods, not at the van, not on the trees, just in the air. As if someone was tapping on something hollow that I couldn't see. The rhythm never changed. It was mechanical, repetitive, too steady to be natural, too organic to be man-made. It continued for almost 20 minutes. I sat frozen back against the van, fire crackling low, Sloane growling deep in her chest. And when it stopped, I swear I felt a pulse in the dirt beneath me. A heartbeat, just one thud, enough to make the soil shift beneath my boots. Enough to make me wonder if I'd imagined it. At 2:13 a.m., I heard footsteps. They weren't heavy. They didn't crash through the brush. They were slow, intentional, a barefoot shuffle, and they circled the campsite. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I couldn't see anything, just the orange edge of the firelight and the darkness beyond, thick as tar. But I could hear them. One step at a time, all the way around, and then again, closer. Sloane was pressed against my side, her entire body trembling, teeth bared but silent. She wouldn't bark now, as if she understood that sound would be a mistake, as if she knew we were being measured, studied. At one point, the footsteps stopped right behind the van. I could hear shallow breathing, ragged, wet, and then a low laugh, a woman's laugh. It lasted just 2 seconds, but it wasn't human. It mimicked a human laugh, but it was off, glitching. Broken, like a recording dragged through static. Then, nothing. Total silence. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I didn't blink until the sky turned faintly gray and the fire burned itself into ash. At dawn, I packed. I didn't eat. I didn't make coffee. I didn't say goodbye to the place. I just threw everything into the van and turned the key. Sloane didn't need coaxing. She leapt in and curled into a tight ball, eyes wide, ears twitching, the way a dog does when she's trying to make herself invisible. But the forest didn't let me go easily. Half a mile down the road, just before I reached the old fire gate, I saw a figure, standing dead center in the road. A woman, hair long and tangled, skin as gray as fog, wearing a pale dress soaked at the hem as if she'd walked up from a swamp. Her face was turned away, but I could see her neck, bruised, purpled, twisted too far to one side. I slammed the brakes. The van skidded in the dirt. The figure didn't move. And then, without turning, she stepped off the road, melted into the trees like smoke. I didn't look for her. I didn't stop. I drove straight through the gate and didn't look back. Not once. I didn't stop driving until I hit the gas station off Highway 63, nearly 50 miles from the edge of the forest. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my wallet at the register. The woman behind the counter didn't say anything about it, just gave me a quick look, the kind you give someone who's seen something they'll never be able to explain. I bought 2 bottles of water, a half-crushed sandwich, and a pack of jerky for Sloane. I sat outside on the curb watching semis crawl past under the rising sun, trying to slow my breathing. Sloane wouldn't eat. She kept looking back in the direction we'd come from, whining low, confused, unsettled. I understood, because I felt it too, like I'd left something behind, but not mine. Something that belonged to the forest, something that had been watching me and wasn't quite finished. That day I drove without direction, just kept putting miles between me and Angelina. I crossed into Louisiana by afternoon, but the air still felt thick, like I hadn't escaped. It wasn't until somewhere near Shreveport that the pressure in my chest finally eased, just a little. And when I pulled off at a roadside motel, I told myself I'd imagined most of it. That fear had a way of reshaping reality, that maybe the mind creates monsters when you ask it to sit with silence for too long. But that night, as I tried to sleep on a cheap mattress with the hum of a vending machine outside the window, I heard the knock again. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. It came from the wall behind the bed. I shot up, heart pounding, cold sweat blooming along my spine, but there was no one there, just peeling wallpaper and a lamp that flickered once when I switched it on. Sloane was already on her feet, staring at the wall, growling low. That sound again, like her throat was warning something not to come any closer. And I knew right then, whatever was in those woods hadn't stayed in the trees. Some part of it had followed me. I didn't go back to the road for a while. Parked the van behind my cousin's place near Bastrop and stayed inside for a month. Tried to write it off, told myself I was tired, that it had been too many days alone, that the silence had gotten inside me and pulled something loose. But that's not the truth. The truth is, Angelina changed me. It's not just the fear, it's not just the voice or the figure on the road. It's what I started to realize about myself in those moments of stillness, when I couldn't hide behind the wheel, or the music, or the endless freedom of open roads. When you sit long enough in a place that watches you back, you stop pretending. And I'd been pretending for a long time, pretending that I was out there for peace, that I was running towards something better. But I wasn't. I was running from the quiet, from the guilt, from the things I'd left behind in Austin, a family I never called, a job I walked out on, a woman I never apologized to. I thought if I moved far enough, camped deep enough, I could bury those ghosts. But ghosts don't stay buried just because you drive past a state line. They ride with you. They whisper when the fire dies down. And in a place like Angelina, where the forest holds stories older than you'll ever be, those whispers echo back louder than you expect. That second month off the road, I started dreaming again. Vivid, sharp dreams. The same woman I'd seen in the road would visit me, only now she was inside the van, sitting in the passenger seat, silent, her face still turned away. Every night she got closer to facing me. Every night I woke up before I could see her eyes. But one night, I didn't. And when she turned, her eyes weren't hollow. They were mine. staring back at me, judging me, demanding something. It took another 6 weeks before I could look at the van without that cold drop of fear settling in my gut. But eventually I went back to it, cleaned it out, let Sloane inside first, watched her carefully. She sniffed the seats, the floor, the dashboard, didn't growl, didn't whimper, just lay down in the back and sighed, a deep, exhausted sound, like she was done being afraid, and it was time I was too. I turned the key. The engine started on the first try. I didn't go far that first day. Just a few miles up the road to a small gravel lot near Lake Bastrop. We parked under a canopy of oaks. I made a fire. I sat quietly and watched the flames. No voices, no laughter, just whine through branches. Stillness. But this time, I didn't pretend it was peaceful. This time, I knew what that stillness was. An invitation. Not to relax, not to forget, but to face it. Whatever it is you carry, your fears, your guilt, your regrets, they don't vanish when you run. They wait. And when you sit still long enough, they find you. Maybe that's what Angelina was. A place that doesn't let you lie to yourself. A forest that strips you bare and shows you what's left underneath. And here's the thing they don't tell you about fear. It's not always a warning. Sometimes it's a mirror. I haven't gone back to Angelina. I don't think I ever will. But I don't tell people to stay away. I tell them, if you go, go ready. Not with weapons, not with backup. Go ready to listen. Not to the trees, not to the birds, but to yourself. Because out there, when the world goes quiet enough, you'll hear the thing you've been running from, and it'll hear you too. And if you're lucky, it'll leave you alone. But if you're like me, if you've got something heavy you've buried too deep to name, it might follow you home, and it might knock. I started hearing the knock more often after that. It didn't matter where I parked. Didn't matter if I was in a crowded state park, a gravel pull-off near the interstate, or a friend's driveway. It always came between 2 and 3 in the morning. Always the same rhythm. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 more. I never heard footsteps. Pankfoots. Never saw a shadow, just that sound, like someone gently reminding me they hadn't left. And I tried everything to explain it away. Wind, tree branches, the expansion of the van's metal frame cooling at night. But you can't lie to yourself when your body knows the truth. And mine knew. Deep in my bones, in my chest, in that tightening behind the eyes you get when you're staring at something you can't rationalize. Whatever I brought out of Angelina wasn't physical. It wasn't something that could be touched or seen in the traditional sense. It was psychological, spiritual, an awareness that had attached itself to me, to my silence. And the longer I stayed on the road, the more I realized this wasn't about the place. It was about the space inside the van, the space between sleep and waking, the mental space that opens up when you're alone for days and days with nothing but the sound of tires on asphalt and birdsong at dusk. That's when it found me. When I was still, not afraid, not yet, just still. There's a difference between being alone and being watched. And when you felt that difference once, you start to feel it everywhere. Every time I parked for the night, I checked the mirrors a dozen times. I'd keep the doors locked, windows cracked, just enough for air. But nothing helped. The knock always came. And after the 4th or 5th time, I stopped checking because I already knew there would be no one there. Because the knock wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was coming from within. It took a long time to admit that. Because to admit that meant acknowledging the part of myself I'd been avoiding. The part that had grown quiet after Angelina, but never truly healed. I started to remember things I didn't want to. I remembered the last time I saw my sister, 5 years ago, right before her accident. Remembered the way I ignored her calls that week, told myself I was too busy, told myself I'd call her back. I never did. And when I finally stood over her casket, I felt nothing. Not sorrow, not guilt, just a hollow space I didn't understand. And maybe that's what I'd been trying to fill out on the road, not with people, not with destinations, but with fear, with places like Angelina that forced me to feel something again, even if it was just dread. Some part of me wanted to be punished, and that forest, whatever lives there, knew it. I kept a journal after that, not for content, not for the channel, just for myself. Pages filled with sketches, dreams, thoughts I'd never spoken out loud. One entry from late September still haunts me. I wrote it just outside Zion, pulled into a rocky overlook with the wind hammering the van from all sides. I don't even remember writing it, but when I read it now, the handwriting is mine. She's not a ghost. She's the weight. She's what you won't carry. She knocks because she knows you're still listening. I don't remember dreaming that night, but the next morning I found 3 fingerprints on the inside of the window above my bed. They were small, narrow, like a child's, and they were on the inside of the glass. After Zion, I stopped sleeping in the van for a while. I couch hopped, hotels, even spent a few nights in my sleeping bag under open skies. I told myself I needed fresh air, that I was tired of the tight quarters. But the truth was simpler. I was scared that whatever was in there had found a way to live with me, that I'd become its home. And the more I tried to outrun it, the more it twisted into something else. Not fear, exactly. Not anymore. It had become a kind of companionship, a silent presence that walked just behind me, a shadow that sat across the fire. The knock became a reminder. You're still not facing it. You're still not free. I thought about quitting the road, selling the van, going back to Austin, settling down, getting a job again, maybe. But that thought made me feel more dead than the knock ever did. Because whatever had opened in Angelina, whatever had woken up, wasn't something I could put back to sleep. And that's the hardest part about these stories. About fear. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't the place or the spirit or the knock in the night. It's the part of you that wants it, because at least then you feel something. I returned to Texas in November, not to Angelina. I wasn't ready for that, but I drove the back roads north of it, past the old trailheads, through towns with boarded-up windows and fading gas stations. I pulled over once near a dried-up riverbed just outside Zavala, got out of the van, let Sloan run ahead into the brush. I stood there for a long time, listening. The trees didn't move, the wind didn't come, but I felt it hurt again. Not watching, not warning, just waiting. I didn't go any farther, just nodded once, like I understood something I hadn't before. And when I got back in the van, there were no knocks that night, just silence, but a different kind of silence, not absence, acceptance. They say Angelina is cursed, that people disappear out there, that the woods shift at night, swallowing trails and twisting sound. Maybe that's true. But I think the real danger isn't the forest, it's what you bring into it, because the forest doesn't forget, it doesn't forgive, it reflects. And if you're not ready to see yourself clearly, fully, you won't come out the same. Some part of you stays there, and some part of it comes back with you. I wish I could say the knock stopped for good after that. I wish I could say facing it once, standing still and not flinching was enough. But the truth is, there's no single moment of triumph. Fear like that, it doesn't leave clean. It seeps in, it settles, it reshapes how you think, how you move, how you breathe when the wind dies and the fire flickers low. But something had shifted, not in the van, not even in the woods, in me. And that shift didn't come with answers. It came with more questions. Not about the forest or ghosts or any supernatural thing we like to dress fear up in. It came with the question I'd been dodging since the day I left Austin in that rusted green Westphalia. What exactly are you looking for out here? I used to say freedom. I'd flash that word like a badge, like a pass that let me avoid accountability. But freedom isn't just about getting away. It's about what you do when there's no one left to blame. No more routines, no more excuses, just you, yourself, and the quiet that always finds you. And if you're not ready for that, the road becomes a mirror, just like the forest, just like her. I spent that winter moving slow, southern Arizona. Desert campgrounds where the wind talks all night and the coyotes remind you you're still a visitor. No trees, no heavy dark, just sky and space and bone-dry cold. It was a kind of relief, but even then, I'd catch it. Out of the corner of my eye, in the reflection of the van window at twilight, that figure. Not always clear, sometimes just the hint of a shoulder, a strand of dark hair, the curve of a cheek in a pane of glass, never moving, never angry, just present, like a memory that refuses to stay buried. One night outside of Bisbee, I was watching the stars when I heard it again, not the knock, a voice, soft, feminine, unmistakable. It said one word, stop. I froze, not out of fear this time, out of understanding, because I finally knew what she meant. I'd spent months running, years if I'm honest, not just from people or places, but from the person I used to be, the version of me who let people down, who ghosted friends when they needed me, who shut the door on family, who built walls out of silence and called it solitude. And the road had let me do it, had given me miles and sunsets and quiet places where no one asked who I was before. But Angelina didn't play by those rules. That forest didn't care about freedom or healing or curated campfire stories. It stripped me, showed me what happens when the silence looks back. So when she whispered, stop, it wasn't a warning. It was a command, not to stop driving, not to stop camping, to stop pretending, to stop running from the past like it wasn't part of the journey. I sat up most of that night, staring into the nothing between stars, letting it sink in. And somewhere around 4 a.m., I opened the passenger door and said it out loud, I hear you. It felt strange, like talking to someone I couldn't see but had known forever, like answering a call I'd missed too many times. I hear you. And I said again, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. I think I cried after that. I don't remember much, just the cold and the weightlifting, little by little, like dust rising in morning light. That spring, I did something I never thought I would. I drove back toward East Texas, didn't go into the forest, didn't hike the trails, but I parked along the edge of the Angelina boundary line, where the woods grow thick and old and the road turns to gravel. I turned off the engine, let Sloan out, and waited. No knock, no voice, just the wind moving through pine needles like breath. The forest didn't pull me in, it didn't push me away, it just watched. And for the first time, I didn't flinch under its gaze. I wasn't looking for forgiveness. I wasn't looking for closure. I was just there, standing still, present. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's all the haunting needs, to be heard, to be acknowledged, not solved, not feared, just seen. If you ask me now if I believe in ghosts, I'll say yes, but not the sheet over the head kind, not the horror movie kind. I believe in the ghosts we carry. Regrets, memories, unfinished apologies, unspoken grief. They live in us, walk beside us, sit quietly in the corners of our vans, whispering when the road goes dark and there's no one left to distract us. And if you're lucky, if you're honest, those ghosts don't ruin you. They teach you. They guide you back to yourself. I still camp alone, still drive the Westphalia up long, winding roads to places where the sky feels bigger than anything I've done wrong. But now I let the silence in. I don't fight it. I listen. And sometimes, when the night is particularly still, I knock. 3 soft beats. Pause. 3 more. Not to summon her, not to challenge the forest, but as a reminder that I made it through, that I'm still here, that some ghosts don't leave because they were never meant to. Because they are you, and when you finally face them, they stop being shadows in the trees. They become your story. I don't know what brought me to the road in the first place. Not really. People always ask. They say, what made you want to live in a van? Was it burnout, wanderlust, minimalism? And I used to give them all kinds of answers. Freedom, simplicity, escape. But now I think the real reason was quieter, more buried. I wasn't chasing something. I was running from myself, from the life I didn't live right, from the people I left hanging, from the parts of me I didn't want to carry anymore. And when you run like that, when you run with ghosts in your rear view, you don't realize you're still carrying them. You don't realize they ride with you in the storage bins, behind the curtains, under the bed, until one night, in a place like Angelina, they come knocking. I've thought a lot about that forest, the way it swallowed time, the way the air changed when you crossed the tree line. I used to wonder if the people who disappeared in there were taken by something evil, but now I wonder if it was something honest, something that showed them the truth too fast, too fully, and they couldn't take it. Because the truth, when it comes without warning, can unmake you. But if you're willing, it can also put you back together. I still don't know who she was. The girl in the woods, the whisper in the dark, the prints on the window. I've looked into local legends, missing persons, indigenous stories, folklore, spirits, and maybe there's something there, some ancient force that watches those woods and waits for the ones who walk in with too much pain and not enough clarity. But I don't need the facts anymore. I don't need her name, because I know what she is. She's not a ghost in the forest. She's the part of me I tried to bury, the part that grieved, the part that cared, the part that remembers. And once I finally stopped running, she didn't need to haunt me anymore. She just walked beside me. Now, when I camp, I don't just tell stories for views. I tell them because someone needs to hear that the road isn't just about adventure. It's not just about sunsets and s'mores and perfect Instagram shots. It's about reckoning. It's about going deep enough into the silence that you find the things you've tried to silence inside yourself. And sometimes that silence knocks back. There was one last time I heard it. This spring, West Texas, near Big Bend, a place where the stars come so close they feel like old gods watching you breathe. It was just before dawn, a pink line cracking the horizon. The knock came, soft, slow, familiar. But this time I didn't freeze, didn't panic. I just smiled. Because I knew what it meant now. Not a threat, not a warning, an invitation. To listen, to be still. To live not in fear, but in truth. There's a kind of peace that comes after fear. Not the fake kind, not the forced kind. The kind you earn by facing the thing you never thought you could. By walking into the woods when every cell in your body says, turn back, and doing it anyway. By understanding that freedom doesn't come from escape, it comes from return. To the places you were scared of, to the person you used to be, and to the ghosts that waited patiently for you to stop running. If you're listening to this, if you're on the road or thinking about hitting it, if you're lying awake in your Volkswagen van in the middle of some silent nowhere, wondering why it feels like the darkness is listening, I want you to know this. You're not alone. Not because someone's watching, but because all of us carry something out there. All of us drive with things we haven't faced. And when the knocking comes, because it will, you don't have to be afraid. You just have to be honest. Say it out loud. I hear you. I see you. I'm still here. Then open the door, not to the fear, but to yourself, to the story only you can tell. That's the truth about Angelina. It's not just the most dangerous place to camp in the US. It's the place where you are the danger, where your silence becomes sound, where the forest doesn't take you, it shows you. And if you come back, you'll never be the same, but you'll be real. And sometimes that's scarier than any ghost, but it's worth it. Every damn mile, every knock, every night, you're worth it. Even if it takes a forest to remind you, even if it takes fear to wake you up. So the next time you pull off some back road, shut the engine, zip into your sleeping bag, and the night wraps around you a little too tight, don't flinch when you hear it. Don't panic. Just listen. It might not be something outside. It might be you. And that's okay. You're not haunted. You're remembering. You're becoming whole. One knock at a time. I didn't go looking for danger. No one ever does. Not really. When I bought the old 1985 Volkswagen Vanagon, it wasn't to chase ghosts or flirt with the edge of fear. I just wanted quiet. Space. Something simpler than the life I'd been living in Pittsburgh. One too many 12-hour shifts, too many nights of wondering who I'd become. I thought the woods would be healing. But sometimes the things we run toward don't bring peace. Sometimes they show us exactly what we've been trying to ignore. I had no idea what Blackwater Falls State Park would become for me. No idea it would haunt the way I breathe, even now. It was October. The leaves were red and blood bright, like fire caught mid-burn. I'd been on the road for 6 days, winding through West Virginia with no real plan. Just me, the VW, and a battered journal with dog-eared pages. I'd heard about Blackwater from a gas station attendant in Parsons, said it was real pretty this time of year. Said it with a look I didn't notice until later, like he knew something I didn't. I arrived late afternoon. The air had that brittle crispness that means night is coming fast. I chose Site 29, right near the edge of the forest, farthest from the restroom lights. I liked the quiet. I always chose the quiet. That was my mistake. It was just me. I always traveled solo. 32 years old, ex-paramedic, no kids, no spouse, no need to answer to anyone. I liked it that way. I set up camp, unfolded the pop top, cracked a beer, and listened to the hush thicken as twilight settled. You don't realize how loud the silence can be until you're deep enough into nowhere. I remember how still it felt. No wind, no bugs, just the long, slow breathing of trees and the distant hush of the Blackwater River. It started that first night, the knocking, 3 taps, light, deliberate like a fingertip on glass. Not loud enough to startle, just enough to make your body freeze before your brain catches up. I was lying in the van, half asleep, maybe 11 p.m. Thought it was nothing. Raccoons, branches falling, the usual. But then it came again. 3 knocks. Same rhythm, same hesitation between each one. I sat up and held my breath, listening. The forest didn't answer. No crickets, no owls, just that kind of wrong silence that feels like it's holding its breath with you. I waited. 10 minutes. Nothing. Eventually, I laid back down, told myself it was the cold playing tricks. I didn't believe it, but I needed to. By morning, it was easy to dismiss. Blue sky, coffee on the Coleman stove, hikers passed by with kids and dogs, all laughter and trail maps. The park looked so normal, so safe. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Overworked brain, too many lonely nights, nerves shot from years of emergency calls. That old trauma had teeth, and sometimes it bit without warning. But that second night, that's when things shifted. It rained just after sundown. Not hard. Just enough to smear the world in wet shadows. I was in the van reading, flashlight clipped to the ceiling, the sound of droplets tapping the fiberglass roof. Comforting, almost. Comforting. I like rain. I've always liked it, until it stopped, all at once, like someone turned off a faucet. I looked up. The kind of silence that fell wasn't right. It had weight, like it was pressing down on the van. I sat up again, same as the night before, holding my breath, listening. And then the smell came. Rot. Like wet leaves layered over something deeper. Something spoiled. You know the smell of roadkill when it's just begun to decay? Not strong, but enough to hit the back of your throat. I got out of the van, barefoot, stupid, holding a tiny flashlight like it would matter if something was really out there. I scanned the tree line. My breath came out in puffs. The air was colder than it should have been for October. Freezing, even. I didn't see anything. But I heard it. Not footsteps. Not quite. Something moving low to the ground. Dragging. A crunch. Then a pause. Another crunch. I backed toward the van without turning around. My skin was tight with adrenaline, but I didn't run. Not yet. I kept telling myself it was just an animal. A bear, maybe. A deer. Plenty of those in West Virginia. But deer don't crawl. And whatever I heard, it crawled. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, headlights off, trying to listen over the pounding in my chest. I don't scare easy, but this wasn't normal. There was something wrong with that campsite, with the trees, with the air itself, like the forest was watching, waiting. I thought about leaving right then. Should have. Every instinct said, go. But I stayed. I rationalized it like I always did. Told myself I was tired, hallucinating, making something out of nothing. The next day, I met someone. Her name was Jamie, mid-40s, parked 3 sites down with an old blue Westie and a golden retriever named Klaus. She looked like someone who'd done this her whole life. Weathered, competent, unbothered by the world. I asked if she'd heard anything weird last night. She looked at me too long before answering. No, she said. Then added, but I don't camp this far out usually. Something about this edge of the park gets to me. I wanted to ask more, but she changed the subject. Fast. Offered me a cup of coffee and then started talking about trails and waterfalls and the best local pie. But something behind her eyes stayed cautious. That night was the worst, because that was the night I saw it. Same setup, same time. Around 11 p.m., I just turned off my light. The forest felt tighter than before, like the trees had leaned in closer, like the shadows were thicker, heavier. I hadn't even closed my eyes when I heard the tapping again. But this time it wasn't 3 knocks. It was 4. Faster, urgent. Right on the side panel of the van, I bolted upright. The knocking stopped. I reached for the flashlight, heart hammering, when I heard something scrape along the rear bumper. Slow, deliberate, metal on metal. I swung the light. Nothing. But the back window was fogged from the outside. From the outside. I stepped out with my flashlight, stupid, reckless, but something in me had snapped. I needed to see. The beam of the light cut through the mist. There, at the tree line, maybe 20 feet out, something moved, low to the ground. Long limbs, pale, wrong. It didn't walk, it slid, and when my light hit its face, if you can call it that, I remember the way the eyes caught the beam. Not like an animal, not red, not glowing, just hollow, like it absorbed the light, like it was watching me through a hole punched in a paper mask. And then it smiled. That was the moment I ran. I didn't think. Just slammed the van door shut, locked everything, grabbed the keys, and turned the ignition. The engine stuttered once, twice, and then roared to life. I peeled out of that sight so fast I don't even remember turning onto the park road. I didn't stop driving until Thomas. 30 miles. No music, no breath, just the road and the thing I couldn't explain chasing the corners of my mind. But the worst part? When I looked at the back of the van the next morning, there were handprints. Small, greasy, like they'd been left by something that didn't quite understand how hands worked. I washed the prints off with a rag and a half bottle of water in the gas station parking lot, but it didn't matter. The shape of them stayed in my mind. 4 fingers, no thumb, too long, too thin, like they were stretched from the knuckle out. Not human. Not quite. I didn't sleep that night either. Parked behind a diner, engine running, doors locked. I kept the headlights on just in case something moved, but they never caught anything but steam rising from the pavement. By dawn, the fear had dulled just enough to let doubt back in. Had I imagined it? Was I really so far gone that my brain invented something from the shadows? It wouldn't be the first time trauma had twisted reality. My hands were steady enough to drive, but my mind was full of cracks. I told myself I needed closure. That's what I said. But the truth was something deeper, darker. I needed to know. So I went back, not that same night. I waited 3 days, slept in hotels, drove farther south, kept the van in open spaces. But the memory stalked me. The knocking, the fogged glass, that thing in the woods that smiled like it knew me. Blackwater Falls kept calling, like unfinished business, like an itch in my spine that wouldn't leave me alone. When I finally returned, the weather had shifted. A warm front came through, stirring fog and mud and early decay into the trees. The park looked the same on the surface, but the feeling was worse, heavy. Like the forest itself remembered me. Jamie was gone. Site 26 was empty. No Westy, no Klaus, no note. I chose Site 8 this time, closer to the front, near the ranger station and the gravel loop. I told myself I'd be safer with people nearby, that whatever happened before was tied to that far corner near Site 29, that it couldn't follow me here. But dread isn't logical. It creeps. The first day was uneventful. I hiked to the overlook, ate an MRE by the fire, even laughed at myself for being so shaken. It felt manageable. I felt like myself again, or close enough. That night, though, the knocking returned. Not on the van this time, on the ground. I was lying in the back with the curtains drawn when I heard it. A soft tap, 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 like something knocking on wood. Slow, measured, rhythmic. It was coming from beneath the van. I didn't move. My breath caught in my chest, shallow and silent. I reached, slow as I could, and opened the curtain just a crack. The campsite looked still. The fire had died down, no movement in the trees. Then the knocking changed. It got faster. 4 quick taps, then silence. Then again. Like Morse code, like it was trying to talk. That's when I felt the van shift. A weight, light but noticeable, like something was crawling up the rear bumper. I froze. The instinct to run warred with the logic that told me not to open that door. I didn't want to see what was out there. I didn't want it to see me. Then came the voice. Not loud, not even clear, just a whisper beneath the wind. At first, I thought it was just the trees, the way wind threads through branches. But then it said my name, not the whole thing, just the first syllable. Rye. That's all. But that was enough. I'd never told anyone my name in that park. Not Jamie. Not the ranger at check-in. I'd signed in under initials. RM. The whisper knew more than it should have. I stayed inside that van till dawn. Didn't sleep. Didn't move. Just watched the gray light slowly bleed across the horizon and prayed it would chase the thing back into whatever hollow it had crawled from. When the sun finally broke, I got out and checked the ground. The dew was thick that morning. Everything was slick with moisture, except for the exact space under my van. Dry, completely untouched, and on the gravel beneath there were prints, long smears like fingers dragging in a spiral. Not animal, not boots. Just thin grooves as if whatever had been under me didn't walk. It slithered. I packed fast. I don't even remember folding the pop top. I just slammed it down and drove. Left the camp stove behind. Left my folding chair. Didn't care. I told myself that was it. I was done. That was the last time I'd ever set foot in Blackwater Falls. But the story didn't end there, because 3 weeks later I got a message. Not a call, a letter. No return address. Just a manila envelope sealed with tape waiting for me in the P.O. box I kept in Morgantown. Inside was a single Polaroid, faded and creased. It showed the rear of my van parked in Site 29, taken at night, and there, behind the van, a figure, not clear, blurry, low to the ground. The same shape I'd seen in the woods, the same smile. Taped to the back of the photo was a single note typed like from a typewriter. You shouldn't have come back. I moved after that, got rid of the van, sold it to a kid from Asheville who thought it had vibes. I didn't tell him what it had seen, what I had seen. But it didn't matter, because sometimes when I'm driving late at night, I still hear it, that knocking. 4 beats, always 4. I started hearing it in places it didn't belong. Not just in the woods, not just in the van. After I sold it, after I moved, after I locked myself behind city noise and thick apartment walls, it would find me in parking garages, in cheap motels, in the silence between midnight and sunrise when the air feels wrong and the dark feels deeper than it should. The knocking, 4 beats, always 4. Once I heard it in the shower. The water was scalding hot, steam thick around my face, and behind the hiss of the faucet, there it was. Tap, 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 tap. I ripped the curtain back. Nothing. I started sleeping with headphones on, not music. Static, pure white noise. It was the only thing that made the silence bearable. But even then, in the blank space behind the sound, I could still feel it, like a pressure in the air, like someone standing too close in a room you can't see. I tried therapy, told the story without the teeth, left out the Polaroid, the smile, the voice that whispered my name, called it a sense of unease, hallucination triggered by isolation. I knew the lingo. I'd been a paramedic long enough to recognize the symptoms of trauma. But deep down, I also knew when something isn't just psychological. I knew what I saw. And the thing is, it wasn't done with me. It came back in January, coldest month on record. I was living out of a sublet in Wheeling, trying to forget the road, the woods, the van. I hadn't camped in months. No hiking, no state parks. I told myself I'd moved on. Then came the dream. But it wasn't a dream. It felt borrowed. I was in the woods, not walking, floating. Everything gray, fog bleeding through the trees like breath from a dying lung. I could see my van ahead of me, parked exactly where I left it that first night at Site 29. But it looked different, older, rotted, like it had been abandoned for years. And I was moving toward it, even though I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed no, but I couldn't stop. I glided closer through brambles that should have torn me, across ground that should have cracked beneath my weight, until I stood at the back hatch. The door opened by itself. Inside, there was a mirror, just one, hanging where my sleeping bag used to be. And in that mirror, I saw myself. Except Not. My eyes were gone, hollow, black. My mouth hung open like a wound that had never healed. And behind my reflection, that smile, wider this time, stretched across something too pale, too wet. Its hands rested on my shoulders like it belonged there, like it had always been there. I woke up screaming. Sweat soaked the sheets. My window from the inside was fogged over with handprints. 4 of them. No thumb. After that, I stopped sleeping. I researched instead, dug into old maps, folklore, newspaper archives about Blackwater Falls. It's not the kind of place that shows up on paranormal watch lists, but it should be. Not because of big stories. There aren't any headlines that scream haunting or murder. It's the quiet things. People who disappear for a few days and return different. Cold, staring. Hikers who swear they were only out for an hour, but their watches say 8. Rangers who transfer out without giving notice. A couple found sitting beside their extinguished campfire, eyes wide open, unmoving, lips bloodless, but alive. No explanation. Just blank. And then I found it. An old Ranger's blog from 1996. Barely readable, clunky HTML, long since archived, but one post hit me like a fist in the chest. It's always the same pattern. Campsite 29, or near it. 4 knocks, always 4. You can't see it until it wants to be seen, and if it smiles at you, leave. If it speaks your name, it's already inside. That last sentence broke something in me because it had spoken my name. The fear turned sharp again, immediate. Not dread, panic. I threw everything I owned into boxes. Moved to Arizona. Desert. No trees, no fog. No old parks with creaking wood signs and silence that lingers too long. But running only changed the backdrop. Not the story, because it followed. The first time I heard it in Arizona, it was dry lightning season. I was parked outside a grocery store in Tucson, windows down, waiting for the sky to open. And then tap, 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 tap on the roof of the car. I didn't even look. I drove 70 miles west into the desert that night, parked in a wide-open flat where no trees could hide it, slept with a flashlight gripped in both hands like that mattered. And still I dreamed of Site 29, except now the van was gone, and the mirror was me, looking out, waiting, and smiling. I couldn't live like that anymore. I had to go back, not to face it, not to beat it, but because I had to end it, whatever that meant. I couldn't keep dragging this thing behind me like a ghost with my name carved into its teeth. So I went back to Blackwater Falls. Not in a van, not camping. I stayed in a cabin, old brick chimney, thick walls, a half-mile from the campgrounds. It was January again, a full year since the dream. The park was quiet, frozen, no leaves, no color, just bone trees and ice-laced trails. I walked down to Site 29 just before dusk. My boots crunched against gravel. The site looked smaller than I remembered, like time had shrunk it. There was nothing there. No van, no mirror, no figure, but I could feel it. The pressure, the cold in the lungs that doesn't match the air, the wrongness. I knelt down where the back of my van had once been and whispered, "I'm not yours." No echo, no wind, just silence. Then from behind me, a laugh. Low, wet, like breath through mud. I didn't turn around. I stood up and walked back to the cabin. That night I heard the knocking again, 4 beats on the back wall. But I didn't answer. I didn't look. I didn't acknowledge. Because maybe that's the secret. Maybe it only gets inside if you let it, if you open the door. It's been 7 months since that final night in the cabin at Blackwater Falls. I haven't heard the knocking since. Not in the walls, not in the car, not in my head. But that doesn't mean it's gone. People ask me why I ever went back. Why, after everything I saw, I didn't just stay away, burn sage, change my name, move to Mexico, and never set foot near another pine tree again. I used to answer with a shrug, say it was about facing fear. Closure. But those are words for other people, people who haven't heard their name whispered in the dark by something that doesn't belong to this world. The truth is simpler, harder, more honest. I went back because I had to choose. I had to choose between living with fear or inside it, because that's what it does, that thing, that force, that presence in Blackwater Falls. It doesn't want to kill you. It wants to stay with you. It latches on to moments you can't undo. Mistakes, regrets, traumas you bury like bones. It crawls into cracks of your memory and makes a home there, feeding on the slow, private decay we all pretend isn't happening. I know that now. I didn't beat it and outsmart it. I acknowledged it. And then I refused it. Maybe that's what made the difference. Maybe not. But that night, in that cabin, I laid down on the floor, cold hardwood against my spine, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to speak, to smile, to remind me of what it could do. It didn't. Instead, I remembered. Not the fear, not the thing in the trees, but Jamie, his voice. The way he'd say, "You can't outrun your shadow in a van, Rye. Sooner or later, it catches up." And it had. For both of us. I still don't know what happened to him. No reports, no missing person case ever filed. I looked. I even called his old emergency contact once, an ex-girlfriend. She hadn't heard from him since last year. Said he probably went off grid again. Said she was used to it. I wanted to scream at her. He didn't go off grid, he got pulled under. But I didn't. Because if you tell someone about the pale shape in the mirror or the knocking under your van, they don't hear a warning. They hear madness. That's why I'm recording this story now, because I don't care if you believe me. But I care if you camp there. If you wander into Blackwater Falls in a Volkswagen with peace signs on the back glass and think it's just going to be another scenic weekend, you're wrong. It waits. It always has. I've heard theories from folks online, from the depths of forums no one moderates anymore. Some say it's a spirit tied to the land. Some say it's the soul of something older, older than people, older than trees. Some even claim it's a tulpa, a thought form that grew stronger from the stories we told, from every camper who went looking for something and found too much. I don't care what name you give it. What matters is the pattern. Campsite 29, or near it. Fog, silence, and the 4 knocks. It doesn't always come the first night. It waits until you're tired, until you drop your guard, until you let yourself remember the thing you buried. It doesn't want your body. It wants your attention. And once it has it, the smile comes next. I live in Oregon now. Small town, no woods, no campers. I drive a hybrid hatchback that couldn't off-road if its life depended on it. And I don't look in mirrors when the lights are off. I've learned to sleep again. Slowly, carefully. I keep salt by the doors. I burn cedar sometimes, even though I don't know if it helps. It just feels like it might. But sometimes I still think about going back, to find out what it is, to make sure no one else stumbles into what I did, to see if I can save Jamie. But that's ego talking. That's the part of me that thinks I'm stronger now, that I've healed enough, that I could stare into the smile again and walk away clean. The truth? I barely got out last time, and I know now not everyone does. So I stay here. I write. I tell stories like this one in whispers and warnings, hoping someone listens before the gravel crunches beneath their tires and the fog closes in, and they say, "It's probably nothing." It's never nothing. I hope you remember that. I hope that if you hear 4 knocks, you don't open the door. I hope you run. Because once you hear the smile in your name, once you see the prints on the glass, once you wake up to find the world colder than it should be, and your own memories playing tricks on you, you don't ever forget. And you don't ever come back the same. Blackwater Falls isn't cursed, it's patient. And that's so much worse, because it only needs one thing to come back. You, your doubt, your shadow, your grief, your need to understand. It feeds on what you refuse to feel. And the moment you do, you'll hear it. Tap, tap, like an invitation, like a heartbeat, like it never left, like it's always been there. I don't believe in closure anymore, not really. What happened at Blackwater Falls didn't give me closure. It gave me awareness. A wound that doesn't bleed, but it pulses in silence. It changes the way I see things, the way I trust silence, the way I walk alone, the way I drive at night when the road is too empty for too long. And you know what? Maybe that's the point. Maybe some places exist to remind us what still lives in us when the rest of the world is quiet, when there's no signal, no traffic, no escape hatch. That place taught me that fear isn't a scream, it's a whisper, a slow thaw in your bones, A shift in the air, a knock you're not sure you heard until it happens again. And it will happen again. Not just in Blackwater Falls. There are places like it scattered across this country, forests with no trails, desert rest stops where the lights flicker for no reason, fog that feels like it chooses you. You know the type. You felt it, even if you never said it out loud. The chill behind your neck when you unzip your tent too late at night. The moment you realize you've walked too far from the firelight and can't remember how you got there. That split second when your headlights catch a shape just off the shoulder and your brain refuses to process what it saw. I think we all have one of those moments locked inside us. Some of us were lucky enough to forget, to rationalize it as stress or exhaustion or a dream. But the ones who remember, we don't camp the same. We don't sleep the same. I still drive sometimes, not far, just out into the edge of night where the streetlights thin and the stars get a little too bright, too sharp. And I'll park, crack the window, turn off the engine, and I'll listen. Not for the knocking, not anymore. But for my own breath, to remember I'm still here, that I came back. You have to understand this thing, this presence, this that lives in places like Blackwater Falls. It doesn't hunt like an animal. It waits like a mirror. It doesn't chase. It reminds, and if you're not ready for what you've forgotten, it will give it back to you in pieces you can't hold. That's what it did to me. It gave me everything I'd buried. Jamie, the guilt, the van, that laugh in the dark, the mirror in my mind that still fogs when I think too long about it. But I needed to see it, needed to feel it, because without it, I might have gone the rest of my life thinking fear was weakness, that silence meant safety, that some things only live in stories. Now I know better. I know that fear is not an enemy. It's a compass, a warning. And if you listen carefully, if you really listen, it might just save you. But you have to listen before it's too late, before the smile, before the name, before the knock. I used to think camping was about escape, freedom, that a Volkswagen, a tank of gas, and an open road were all I needed to feel alive. But there's a difference between feeling alive and remembering what it means to survive. Camping stripped me of everything I thought made me strong. It humbled me, brought me face to face with something primal, patient, and unspeakably old. And in the end, it gave me something no city, no therapist, no warm bed ever could. Clarity. Because when you're alone out there and the trees start talking in voices you don't recognize, and the cold feels like it knows your name, and you find yourself asking questions you never dared to ask before, that's when you find out who you really are. Not when things are safe, but when they're not. Blackwater Falls took everything I thought I knew about fear and turned it into something holy, something I carry, something I respect. It's why I don't mock stories anymore, why I don't call people crazy when they say, it didn't feel human, because I've seen what comes out of those woods when the veil thins. And it isn't just shadow, it's reflection. So I'll leave you with this. If you're out there one night, parked deep in a forest, wind resting heavy on the pines, moonlight washing your dashboard in that soft white silence, and you hear something tap 4 times on the back of your van, don't turn around, don't speak, don't look. Because if you do, if you lock eyes with that grin and hear it breathe your name like it's always belonged to you, you won't remember what came before. You'll only remember him and the mirror he left behind. They say silence in the desert is sacred, but the silence I heard that night, it wasn't peace. It was warning, a hollow kind of quiet, the kind that waits to see if you're smart enough to leave or dumb enough to stay. I wasn't always someone who trusted silence. City noise conditioned me. Raised in Phoenix, I spent most of my adult life working in HVC, metal, sweat, the endless hum of rooftop units in triple-digit heat. I had a schedule, a grind, a rhythm. But something cracked in me when my dad passed. That grief never arrived with a shout. It crept, showed up in the smallest things, a missed appointment, a snap at a coworker, The sudden rage I felt one night staring at my own reflection in the windshield of my '88 Volkswagen Westphalia. That van, Dad helped me buy it back when I was 22 and clueless. Get something that forces you to slow down, he said. You drive too fast, you'll miss the life around you. It was rusty, temperamental, always 5 repairs behind what I could afford. But it was mine. And after the funeral, it felt like the only place I could breathe. So I hit the road, started camping in little corners of Arizona, chasing that weird quiet my dad always swore was good for the soul. I wasn't chasing ghosts, but I guess one found me anyway. This all happened last October, just before Halloween. I'd taken 2 weeks off work, told my boss I needed a reset, drove south through Tucson, then west toward Io. That's how I found it, through a comment on a random RV forum. Someone mentioned an abandoned RV park outside a ghost town called Copperstone Flats. Said it had good shade, forgotten electrical hookups, even some structures still standing. They made it sound like a quirky roadside stop, like Route 66 nostalgia. Old neon signs, maybe a couple coyotes howling at night. I was in the mood for weird. I wasn't in the mood for dangerous. But danger doesn't always introduce itself. I arrived just before dusk. The dirt road was narrower than I expected, overgrown, the kind of path you second guess halfway down. But there was something about the landscape, a brutal kind of beauty. Red rock cliffs against a soft pink sky, Joshua trees bent like crooked elbows, the kind of place that looks dead until it moves. The park wasn't listed on any official maps, but GPS pinned it right. A looping gravel lane with maybe 15 old RV pads scattered in a wide arc. Some had the rusted skeletons of trailers still there, slumped like old men with broken backs. Others were cleared, just outlines in the dust, and the ghost of what might have been fake grass. My first mistake was thinking I was alone. I parked under a dying mesquite tree. The ground was cracked hardpan, dust puffed under my boots, no cell service, not unusual out here. I did a slow walk around, just scouting. The buildings were all locked tight, long forgotten. A bathhouse, an office, even a laundry shack, with the doors rotted off but washers still inside. There were signs of animals, burrows, nests, a rattlesnake skin draped over an old sign that read, "Welcome guests." I remember laughing. It felt staged, like the desert was leaning into its own mythology. That night, I lit a small fire in the rusted pit beside my van, cooked a can of chili, drank half a beer. The stars were thick and low, bright enough to see your own breath if you stared too long, but it wasn't cold. Not really. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. It started with the sound. You don't realize how sensitive your ears become in isolation. Without city noise, the smallest rustle feels thunderous. At first, I chalked it up to animals, little feet in the brush, wind through brittle trees. But this was different. It was a tapping, slow, rhythmic, like someone lightly drumming their fingers on metal. Tap, tap, tap. I thought it was coming from one of the old trailers, maybe a loose panel in the wind. I walked toward it, flashlight out, scanning every crevice. Nothing. When I got close to the sound, it stopped. Dead quiet. When I backed away, it started again. Tap, tap, tap. Not faster, not louder, just patient. I tried recording it on my phone, but there was no service, and when I played the audio back, there was nothing but static. The noise was rude, but it didn't want to be captured. That night, I locked the van tight, windows closed, curtains drawn. I told myself it was just metal contracting in the cold desert air, or maybe an animal stuck in the crawl space of one of the abandoned RVs. I've told myself a lot of things I don't believe anymore. I fell asleep to that tapping. It echoed through the floor of the van like it had found a way into the frame. Sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up sweating. The air was still, oppressive, like the night had folded in on itself. I unzipped the sleeping bag and sat up, forehead damp, heart thudding like I'd run a mile. And then I smelled it. Rot. Not sewage. Not dead animal. This was deeper, like mildew and something sickly sweet, like wet carpet left too long under something that died. It was coming through the air vents, but I hadn't run the fan. I climbed out, barefoot, half dazed. The tapping had stopped. Everything was still. I walked toward the bathhouse, thinking maybe there was a septic leak or something had died in the pipes. That's when I saw the figure, standing near one of the old trailers, motionless, a silhouette against the pale moonlight, thin, slight, almost fragile. I thought it might be a scarecrow at first, maybe a prank someone left behind. But then it moved, not toward me, just subtly. The kind of shift you catch in the corner of your eye and pretend you didn't, like it wanted me to doubt it was ever there. I didn't scream, didn't run, I just watched. It didn't look at me, not exactly, but I felt its attention, felt the way the desert air pressed against my skin, thick and judgmental, like I'd violated something sacred by being here. I backed away, slow, kept the van in sight, every hair on my arm standing up, every part of me screaming that I was being watched. When I locked myself back in, the tapping didn't return, but the smell did. Stronger now, like it was seeping in through every bolt and seam. I didn't sleep, just lay there, eyes open, counting the seconds between imagined noises. The wind never picked up, the coyotes never howled. It was too quiet, like the land was holding its breath. When dawn finally broke, it wasn't a relief. It was a warning, a dim orange haze that made everything look warped, as if daylight couldn't quite wash away what the night had done. I stepped outside the van just after sunrise. My legs were stiff from the tension of the night. My hands shook, but not from cold. It wasn't until I stood in the open that I realized just how drained I was. Fear doesn't just visit, it stays. Wears you down in silence, like water on stone. Everything looked normal, or it should have. The same cracked gravel, like if the same crooked trees. The bathhouse was still there, a shadowed shell. The trailers hadn't moved, but somehow it all felt different, like the light was just wrong. Not soft morning light, but flat and gray, like it had passed through something toxic before touching the earth. I walked the grounds again, slower this time, trying to prove to myself that the night hadn't happened, that I'd imagined the figure, that the tapping was just heat and metal. But then I saw the footprints, small, barefoot, leading from the gravel near the trailers to the rear of the bathhouse, clear as day. No shoes, no tread, just the distinct imprint of a human foot, with toes splayed like they'd never worn shoes a day in their life. I knelt beside them. They weren't fresh. The wind should have erased them, but they were perfect, like they'd been etched into the dust instead of pressed into it. I followed them, back of the bathhouse, where a small utility door hung crooked on one rusted hinge. I hadn't noticed it the night before, probably because I hadn't wanted to. The smell was stronger there, thicker. It clung to the back of my throat. My stomach turned, but I pressed on. The door creaked open with a sound like teeth grinding. Inside, darkness. No windows, no light, just a space carved out of concrete and dust and shadow. I raised my flashlight and stepped in. The first thing I saw was the wall. Many someones had scratched into it. Hundreds of marks, tallies, names, phrases. One that stuck out, "Don't stay 3 nights," over and over. Different hands, some carved deep, some shallow, some in what looked like rust, some in something darker. Then the drawings, childlike, crude figures, circles with X's for eyes, long-limbed things looming over RVs, shapes with crooked teeth and open mouths. I didn't know what to make of it. Prank? Cult graffiti? But no, it felt older, more desperate. Like someone trying to warn, not scare. Something shifted behind me. I turned fast, just my own shadow twisting against the far wall. But it looked wrong, too tall, stretched at an angle the light shouldn't have cast. I stepped backward, flashlight flickering. The air was colder here, and it wasn't the desert kind of cold. It was damp, buried, like the place had its own temperature. I left fast, didn't run, but close. Back at the van, I fired it up, thought about driving off, but something in me resisted. Maybe it was pride, maybe stupidity, or maybe the same part of me that used to stay up late listening to my dad's camping stories, how the desert wasn't cruel, just honest, how it showed you what you were really made of. I figured I'd give it one more day, one more night. Then I'd move on. I spent the rest of that day cleaning, walking the perimeter, pretending I could impose order on something that clearly didn't want it. I stacked some rocks to mark the old pads. I wrote a journal entry. I even meditated, sitting cross-legged outside the van, breathing slow, trying to ground myself. It almost worked. Until sunset. The shift was instant. The sky went from soft amber to deep red like blood smeared across a mirror. The clouds thickened fast, unnatural. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in minutes. Then the radio came on. I hadn't touched it. The van was off. Keys in my pocket. But the dash lights blinked and static poured through the speakers. Then a voice. Not a clear voice. Garbled, like something underwater, but it spoke. Leave. Just that one word. Whispered. Crushed under white noise. Then silence. I yanked the keys from my pocket, jammed them into the ignition. The van sputtered, once, twice, then died. Battery light on, gas meter dropping like a stone. I sat frozen, hand on the key, sweat icing down my back. Then the tapping started again. This time it wasn't distant, it was under me. From the belly of the van, the floor vibrated with it, a slow, deliberate rhythm like knuckles on wood. Tap, tap, tap. I bolted. Out the door, barefoot again. Ran a dozen paces before I turned back. The van just sat there, still, unmoving, like nothing had happened, but I knew what I heard, what I felt. I circled back, picked up a wrench from the storage bin, and crouched beside the van. Slowly, I slid under. Gravel bit into my back. The tapping stopped as soon as I looked. There was nothing there. No animals. No branches. Just the undercarriage. Dust. Metal. And something else. A smear. Dark. Oily. Like blood mixed with grease. It trailed from the front axle to the middle of the chassis, then vanished. I wiped at it. It didn't smudge. Didn't flake. It was just there, like a stain that had always been part of the metal. I crawled out fast, wrench in hand, every instinct screaming that I'd made a mistake. A big one. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the driver's seat, staring out the windshield, wrench on my lap, keys ready. The figure came back around 1 a.m., same place, same posture, but closer. It stood beside one of the gutted trailers, body half obscured. No face, just the outline of something too still to be alive. No swaying, no blinking, and it was watching me. I know it. I felt it. My chest tightened, breath caught. It wasn't curiosity in that presence. It was possession, like it was waiting for me to come outside. Then it raised its hand, a long, deliberate motion, and it pointed, not at me, behind me. I turned, heart slamming. Nothing. Just the van's interior, empty. But when I turned back to the window, the figure was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just absence. And in its place, on the gravel where it had stood, new footprints, bare, darker this time. Almost wet, I didn't move the rest of the night. By the time the sun rose on the third day, something in me had begun to fray. I didn't step outside. I didn't open the curtains. I sat motionless in the driver's seat for hours, eyes fixed on the steering wheel, as if the act of moving might make me more visible to whatever else was out there. The smell was back. Stronger, like something that had been festering underground for decades was now just beneath the surface. A rot so thick it coated your teeth. Every breath tasted like old water and sweet decay. I kept swallowing like it would make the stench go away. It didn't. Around noon, I forced myself out. Not because I wanted to, because I had to check the engine. If I couldn't get the van running, I knew I'd lose it. Completely. The thin thread of control I was holding onto was tied to one idea. Escape. The van was cold to the touch. Even under the desert sun, the metal felt like shade. The battery was drained, dead. I popped the hood and stared, but I didn't see anything unusual. Nothing chewed through. No disconnected wires, no reason for the system to die overnight. That's when I noticed the dust. It wasn't normal. It wasn't the light red silt that coats everything out here. It was black, clinging to the air filter, packed under the fuse box, like soot from a fire that had burned underground. I wiped it with my thumb, came away sticky. Not grease, not ash. Something thicker, like tar with memory. I closed the hood and stepped back. The ground didn't feel solid anymore. I know how that sounds, but it's the only way I can explain it. Like the earth was no longer beneath me, but watching through me. My feet tingled, not numb, alive, aware. As if the land knew I was trying to leave, and it didn't want that. That was when I made the call I'd been avoiding. I grabbed the emergency radio I kept in the glove box. It was old school, analog, a backup I never thought I'd use. I flipped through the frequencies. Static, more static, then something, a faint, distant, like it had traveled too far to be real. You have to. Leave it. I froze. Not what it seems. Then nothing. Static again. I couldn't find the voice a second time. I stared at the dial, fingers twitching. That voice had been human, but the way it sounded cracked, as if spoken through a throat that hadn't used words in years. It chilled me, like someone had spoken from deep inside a well or a dream or a memory that didn't belong to me. That afternoon, the wind came. Not gentle desert breeze. This was sudden, sharp, directionless. It howled through the broken fences, shook the twisted street signs, kicked up sand until the entire camp looked like it had been swallowed in a dust storm. I locked myself back in the van, coughing, eyes stinging. The sound was deafening. Wind, yes, but inside it, something else. Voices. Hundreds, maybe more. Not screams, not speech, just the shape of voices, like breath caught mid-sentence, like thoughts made audible without words. They circled the van, and then as quickly as it started, it stopped. Silence. I stepped out again just before dusk. The storm had cleared, but the place looked wrong, as if the entire park had shifted a few feet to the left when I wasn't looking. I know that's impossible, but that's how it felt. The bathhouse wasn't where I remembered. The power boxes, different colors now. The tree I parked under was bare, empty of leaves that had definitely been there the day before. And then I saw the trailer door, the one near where the figure had stood. It was open, not a little, wide. Hinges bent back like it had been ripped, not pushed. I approached slowly, every footstep like a dare. The closer I got, the more I felt it, like static building behind my eyes. Like my own heartbeat wasn't mine anymore. It was too slow, too deliberate. The trailer's interior was dark and colder than outside. I stepped in. It was empty, except for one thing, a chair, old, moldy, facing the far wall. On the wall, something drawn, not scratched, not painted, written in something smeared. A spiral, tight, endless, with one word scrawled again and again inside each loop. Return, not run, not go. Return, as if I'd already left. The chair creaked behind me. I spun, empty. But I'd heard it. That's the moment I realized the truth. I hadn't found this place. I'd been called to it. Whatever this was, this land, this presence, it wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't bad luck. It was deliberate. It had reached out to something broken in me and invited me in, and I had come willingly. I ran, out of the trailer, across the gravel, back to the van. The smell had changed, no longer decay. Now it was copper, metal, like blood misted into air. I opened the door and froze. The cab light was on, but I had never left it on, and on the driver's seat, a handprint. Small, too small to be mine. Pressed into the leather, still wet, as if whoever left it had just walked out. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't speak. I just stared, and then from behind me, just above my left ear, a whisper, not a word, just a breath, close enough to feel. I turned fast, nothing, but my shadow on the van, it had company. For half a second, I saw it. Another shape, slender, wrong, bent at the neck, head tilted toward me like it was curious. And then it was gone. I climbed in, slammed the door, locked it, and I did the only thing I could do. I waited for night. Night didn't fall. It poured, like black ink dumped across the sky. 1 second, the sun hovered red over the jagged hills, and the next, gone. No twilight. No transition. Just a sudden, absolute dark. Inside the van, I kept the flashlight in my lap, pointed at the ceiling, not because I needed it, but because the silence was becoming unbearable. The soft hum of batteries, the quiet crackle of old wiring, even the faint click as I shifted my weight, these were anchors. They proved I was still in the world I knew. But then came the sound I didn't recognize. It started like breathing, not mine, not close. It was outside, circling the van, slow, uneven. Inhale, stop, exhale, scrape, breathing that didn't care about being heard, didn't care about hiding. It wanted me to know. I sat frozen, too afraid to turn off the flashlight, too afraid to move. Then something touched the rear panel, a soft thud. Open palm, then fingers dragging, long, slow, from the rear bumper to the back window. I twisted in my seat, holding my breath, watching the condensation gather on the glass from the inside. And then, suddenly, a smear, a line appeared, as if something had just licked it from the other side. I didn't scream, couldn't. It felt like the thing outside had already taken the sound from my throat. I slid down into the footwell, curling tight, clutching the wrench in both hands. I kept telling myself, it's just fear, just nerves. Nothing real has happened. But something had happened. And then the radio came alive. Not static this time. Music, a faint, warped version of an old country song. Something my father used to play when we drove across Nevada in the 90s. That low, dusty twang of a steel guitar, the lazy drawl of lyrics I hadn't heard in 20 years. Gonna follow the road down to Yuma tonight. I didn't know the radio could even receive signal out here. But it kept playing, and underneath the song, voices, children, laughing, far away, but rising. Then banging, sharp, sudden, metal on metal. The sound of something inside the engine bay. I jumped to the driver's seat, flashlight in hand, and looked through the cracked windshield. The front of the van was steaming, but the engine hadn't run in a full day. Then I heard it, footsteps, not around the van, on top of it, slow, careful, heavy, as if testing the roof, then stillness. No breathing, no scraping, only the terrible knowing. It was right above me. I didn't move for minutes, maybe hours. Time had stopped meaning anything. My heart thudded so hard it drowned out the rest of the world. My body was soaked in cold sweat. I could hear it dripping onto the floor mat, then a new sound, a knock, one tap on the center of the roof, deliberate, as if to say, your turn. I raised the flashlight to the ceiling slowly, no movement, but my hands shook so hard the light wavered like a flame, and then the roof flexed, sank inward, like something impossibly heavy had shifted its weight just above me. I broke. I flung the door open and bolted into the dark. I don't remember grabbing the flashlight. I don't remember deciding to run. I just did. My bare feet pounded the gravel, rocks slicing into my soles, but I didn't stop. I didn't care what direction I went. I just needed to be away. But the park wouldn't let me. No matter which path I took, the same features reappeared. The bathhouse, the trailers, the old billboard with half the paint gone. I ran in circles. I know I did, but my legs told a different story. Each pass left me more exhausted, more disoriented, more certain I wasn't moving at all. Eventually, I collapsed beside the camp's broken fence, gasping, bleeding, shaking so hard the flashlight slipped from my grip. And in the dark, I saw them. Eyes. Dozens, low to the ground, lined along the trees like embers. They blinked, not all at once, one by one, slowly, as if they were learning the rhythm of human movement. And then I heard them speak, not with mouths, with my own thoughts. Words that didn't enter through my ears but grew like vines in the back of my skull. You heard us when you were a child. You were always listening. I covered my ears, cried out, but the words didn't stop. You came to find what your father left behind. That broke something inside me, because they were right. I hadn't chosen this campground at random. I had lied to myself about that. But deep down, I remembered the name. Wickenburg, a place he once talked about. Briefly, quietly, when he thought I was asleep in the back seat. The park we couldn't stay in. He'd said it to someone on a payphone years ago, his voice full of fear, not like him at all. We couldn't stay. The dirt moved. I never forgot those words, but I buried them. Thought it was a dream, or maybe a half memory, twisted by time. But now I knew. He had been here, and something followed him out, something that never let go. The eyes blinked again. And the whisper in my skull grew louder. Return what was taken. Return what was taken. I didn't know what they meant. But then I did. I looked down at my wrist, the old leather bracelet, his bracelet. I'd taken it from a box in the attic after he died, worn it ever since. I'd forgotten where it came from, but now I knew. The leather was cracked, dusty, and something inside it. It pulsed like a heartbeat. I unclasped it with shaking fingers. The moment it left my skin, the wind stopped. The eyes dimmed and the whispering paused. Not vanished, but waiting, I placed the bracelet on the fence post, and the ground exhaled, a deep, guttural sound beneath my feet, like the earth itself had released a breath it had held for too long. Then everything went still. No wind, no voices, just the quiet. I stumbled back toward the van. It started on the first try. No sputtering, no hesitation, as if the thing that had gripped it had let go. I drove fast, tires spitting dust and gravel. Didn't stop to look behind me. Didn't stop until I hit the main road, hours later. But I knew I hadn't escaped. Not really. I drove until the sun came up, and even then I didn't stop. The Arizona highway blurred around me, all red earth and brittle trees. Every time I passed an old road sign or saw a billboard half swallowed by dust, I tensed, waiting for that impossible shift, waiting to look up and see that the asphalt had looped and I was somehow back at that park. But I wasn't. Not yet, anyway. When I finally pulled into a gas station outside of Kingman, I realized how bad I looked. My face in the mirror was a stranger's, eyes wide, skin pale beneath the dust, like I'd been carved from salt. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the pump. The cashier stared when I walked inside to pay. Not the usual glance you give to road-weary travelers. This was different, like I gave off something wrong, like he could feel the desert on me. "Long night?" he asked. I couldn't even nod. My voice was somewhere deep in the canyon I'd left behind. He handed me a bottle of water and didn't charge me. I think he thought I was in shock. He was right. I drove north for hours. No music, no voice messages, just the soft rattle of the van's frame and the whisper of hot wind clawing through the cracked seals of the windows. And still, I couldn't shake the sensation that something was riding with me. Not in the passenger seat. In the van, in the metal, the wiring, the air vents, the empty spaces that shouldn't echo but now did. I stayed in a small town that night, far from any campground. Slept in the van behind a diner, streetlights on, security cameras nearby, but comfort didn't follow me. When I closed my eyes, I dreamed of dust in my lungs, of footsteps across the roof, of a spiral drawn in blood that never ended. I'd wake up choking, lungs straining like I'd run for miles, heart pounding like I was still inside the park. But it wasn't just the dreams. There were signs in the daylight too. Birds stopped singing when I passed. Dogs growled at my van. My reflection lagged behind my movement in the rearview mirror, just slightly, just enough to notice, just enough to make me question if I was still just me. I thought about going home, but the idea felt distant, like the version of me who belonged there had been left behind or peeled away. And then came the worst part. The whispers followed. They weren't loud anymore, not like at the fence. Now they were subtle, not even full words, just murmurs, flickers of thought that didn't feel like mine. I'd be filling my water bottle, and a sudden sentence would bloom in my head. "It wasn't yours to take." I'd be passing an abandoned barn and hear, "You were meant to stay." They didn't scare me the way they had before, not in the same way. They saddened me, like something ancient was grieving, and somehow that grief had made room in me. That's when I knew. This wasn't over. I wasn't being haunted. I was changing. The ground I'd parked on, its scent, its weight, its memory, had embedded itself in me. That abandoned park hadn't just tried to keep me there, it had marked me, and now something in me had been rewritten. I drove aimlessly for days, through Flagstaff, Sedona, Williams, avoided anything that even smelled like a campsite. I ate at gas stations, slept in truck lots. But the van, it carried a presence now, subtle but steady, like something old had curled up in the engine block and gone to sleep, and I was afraid of waking it. I called my brother at one point, told him I was thinking of driving out to Oregon, maybe up the coast. He said I sounded different. "Your voice," he said, "it's like someone else is talking through it." I hung up before he could ask questions. A few days later, I saw a camper by the side of the road, stranded, its hood up, the driver waving for help. I slowed out of instinct, but as I got closer, I felt a pulse through the steering wheel, like the van itself didn't want me to stop. And in the reflection of the camper's window, I saw something, just for a blink, a figure in the passenger seat, slender, bent, watching me. I didn't stop. I told myself I couldn't, that it might be a trick of light, or exhaustion, or trauma echoing back. But deep down, I knew the truth. The thing from that park, it had left the grounds. It was in me. Or maybe it always had been. Maybe that was the whole point. Maybe people like me, wanderers, loners, the brokenhearted and road-weary, we're the bait, the signal, the open door. Because the truth I can't deny anymore is this: there was never an RV park there. Not really. What I saw, the trailers, the structures, the fence, it was just form. A way to make us feel safe, a way to invite us in. The park is a threshold, a skin the earth wears, and underneath there's something older, something that doesn't want blood, doesn't want souls. It wants resonance, echoes. People who carry grief like luggage and memories like old maps. It calls to us, and once you answer, even for a moment, it remembers. Even now, when I drive past desert ruins or old signs pointing toward forgotten exits, I feel the pull. A tightness in my ribs, a voice like dry breath in my skull. And sometimes I consider it. Sometimes I wonder if I did leave, or if I'm just one of them now, drifting between asphalt and sand, carrying the desert inside me, waiting for the next broken traveler to make a wrong turn. Maybe that's why I'm telling you this. Not to scare you, to warn you. Because you might see a place like it, an abandoned park, a cheap campground no one remembers, a strange circle of trailers that looks too quiet. You might think, that looks peaceful. You might feel a strange tug, like the ground is familiar, even if you've never been there. If that happens, don't stop. Don't listen. And above all, don't bring anything home. It's been 7 months. The van sits in a storage unit now, under thick canvas and chain locks. I haven't started the engine since that final stretch of Arizona highway. Haven't touched the steering wheel. I keep the keys in a drawer buried beneath old notebooks and receipts, hoping distance might weaken the pull. But it doesn't. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, dreaming of engine heat and the smell of desert rain. Not the scent you know, not the one you chase when storms are on the horizon. This smell is older, like sun-baked stone cracked open to reveal something that should have stayed buried. I moved back into a real home. 4 walls, a roof, neighbors, a fixed address, things I hadn't had in years. I told myself I was reclaiming stability, building a life that wasn't measured in rest stops and gas receipts. But that wasn't the truth. The truth is, I was trying to contain it because I don't know where the boundary is anymore between the park and me, between what I remember and what I imagine, between the thing I saw and the thing I became the moment I ran from that dirt lot and didn't look back. It's changed me in quiet ways. Lights flicker when I enter a room. Sometimes dogs stop walking and just stare at me as I pass by. My phone dies quickly now, no matter how fresh the battery. And sometimes I hear songs on the radio that haven't existed for decades. Ones my father sang when I was a child, songs I thought only lived in our old cassette tapes, songs that seemed to play just for me and always end on the same note. A single steel guitar string bending until it breaks. But worse than all of that are the memories that aren't mine. I'll be standing at the sink, washing a plate, and suddenly feel the weight of a hammer in my hand, heavy with rust. I'll see flashes of a different campground, maybe in Texas, maybe Utah, and know with total certainty that something terrible is buried beneath campsite number 12. I'll wake up with desert dust on my shoes, even though it's been raining for days. I once asked a therapist if trauma could plant false memories. He said yes, but when I described what I was experiencing, he got quiet, told me I might want to speak to someone more specialized. I never went back, because some things aren't meant to be processed. Some things aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to be carried, like a seed, cracked open in your mind, growing slowly, feeding off the corners of your life until you don't recognize yourself in the mirror anymore. People say, well, you survived. That's what matters. But survival isn't always clean. Sometimes survival is just the body keeping on while your mind is trapped somewhere else, somewhere hot and dry and always watching. I've learned to live with it in a way, like an amputee learns to live with phantom pain. I don't fight it as much now. Don't drown it in denial or push it away with rational explanations. I sit with it. I let it speak. And it does speak. Softly. Rarely. But when the world gets quiet enough, I still hear it. The park. The whisper. The memory of a place that exists both nowhere and everywhere, hidden in the margins of American maps. A place that doesn't appear until you've driven far enough, lost enough, hurt enough. A place that waits for people like me, and maybe like you. Because that's the worst part of this story. The part I tried to ignore when I started telling it. The fact that it's not mine alone. I've met others since. Not many, but enough to know I'm not crazy. A man in New Mexico who won't camp within 200 miles of Wickenburg. A woman in Nevada who once found her RV facing the opposite direction she'd parked it, without tire tracks. A young couple who left a campground after seeing dozens of child-sized handprints appear on the inside of their windows, though they were alone for miles. We don't talk much. We don't need to. The eyes say enough. That same wide, quiet recognition. We're all marked, not by scars or sigils, but by knowing. And here's what I've come to understand. There are places in this country that are hungry, not in the way animals are hungry, not in the way ghosts crave resolution. These places are ancient hungers, born from forgotten violence, from the rituals of old soil, from whispers that predate language. They don't hunt you. They invite you. With silence, with stillness, with a kind of peace that feels like a lullaby but is really the breath before the scream. And when they take from you, they don't steal. They replace, piece by piece, until what's left is someone who can never go home again. Not really. That's why I haven't sold the van, because some part of me knows the road isn't done with me yet. And when it calls again, when I smell that dry electric wind and feel the gravel shift beneath my feet, I'll know it's time. Not to run, not to fight, but to return. Because the scariest part of all this, the most honest part, is that sometimes when I wake before dawn and the street is silent and the world is hushed and still, I miss it, that eerie calm. That dirt-cracked sky. The feeling of being surrounded by something vast and terrifying. Yes, but also aware. And in that awareness, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt seen. Is that what calls us? Not just the thrill, not just the story, but the recognition. A place that sees you in all your brokenness and doesn't ask you to fix it. A place that whispers, you are exactly what we've been waiting for. So if you find yourself on a back road in Arizona and your GPS stutters, if you see a rusted sign with no name or a fence post holding something old and leathered, if your van starts acting strange and the wind starts to hum in a key you don't quite recognize, don't keep going. Because it's not just an abandoned RV park. It's a mirror, and what it shows you, you might never be able to look away from again. I never used to be the kind of person who looked over their shoulder, not at a gas station, not at a trailhead, not even when the moon was out full and fat and every rustle in the brush made the world go quiet. I trusted the road. I trusted my instincts. I trusted the Volkswagen, the soft purr of that engine, the pop top that rose like a second story on a dream, the scent of pine and old upholstery baked into every mile. But Michigan changed that. Not in a way you'd notice right away. Michigan doesn't scream. It whispers. It waits. It watches you settle in. There's a stillness to the Upper Peninsula that feels like a held breath, a forest that remembers everything, and a lake that never gives anything back. It was mid-September when I headed north. I just left Grand Rapids, feeling like I needed space to think, to be, to disappear for a while. I just turned 36. My marriage had ended in a kind of quiet crash. No shouting, just a series of unreturned calls, postponed visits, lost appetite, and a final folded note on the kitchen counter. I took the VW and left. The plan was simple. Follow the coast of Lake Michigan up to Sleeping Bear Dunes, cut through Hiawatha National Forest, and find some boondocking spots near the pictured rocks. I wanted solitude. I thought I'd find it in the trees. The first night, I parked at a small rustic site near Ludington State Park. Nothing official, just a pull-off used by other campers, probably for decades. There was a rusted fire ring, a log with initials carved too deep. I could hear the wind off the lake, sharp and steady. It felt right. Until I woke up. It was just past 3 in the morning. Cold. Too cold for September. I sat up in the VW, confused, breathing fog in my own van. That's when I heard it. Not a knock, not an animal, but a hum. Low, vibrating, mechanical. It wasn't the van. I shut everything off before bed like I always do. This sound, it was coming from outside, maybe 30, 40 feet into the woods. A constant low-frequency drone, like a generator submerged in earth. I thought maybe it was someone else, another camper using off-grid power. But there were no lights, no signs of life. I unzipped the pop-top window and looked out. Black, just trees and mist. Then the hum stopped, clean, sudden, like it had never been there. I didn't sleep after that. Just lay there under my sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling, feeling the air shift. You know that feeling? Like the forest is holding its breath with you? I told myself it was nothing. That morning I made coffee, didn't even mention it in my travel journal. I left Ludington before sunrise. 2 days later, I was farther north, near Manistee, deeper into the wild. I'd found a spot online, a place called Colwood. No formal campground, just state forest land where you could legally park off-trail and spend the night. My kind of spot. No noise, no people. Just me, the van, and the stretch of pines that seemed to go on forever. It was early evening when I pulled in. A long gravel road curved through dense brush, opening into a small clearing. There were broken branches scattered everywhere, more than I'd expect, even in storm season. But the sky was calm. The air had that pre-winter bite to it. I set up camp, lit a fire, and read a dog-eared paperback until the flames died down. Around 11, I slid into the back of the van and zipped up the windows. Then it happened again. That same hum, same pitch, same location. Not near the van, but somewhere just beyond the tree line. This time, it was louder, and it wasn't alone. Mixed in with it was a ticking, like an old grandfather clock just on the edge of hearing. I turned on my phone's recorder. Nothing. Dead silence. Like the air swallowed it up the moment I pressed record. That's when I noticed something else, the smell. Not smoke, not mildew. This was sharp, metallic, like rust and vinegar. It was faint but steady, and it made my eyes water. I slid out of the van, barefoot, stupid, clutching my flashlight and waving it at the woods. Nothing moved. No animals. No wind. Just trees standing perfectly still like they were listening. Then I saw it. About 20 yards in, behind a birch tree, there was movement. A figure, not large, not fast, just still, watching. I raised the flashlight, but it flickered, then died. Dead batteries. The backup wouldn't turn on either. That's when I realized something deeper was wrong. I reached for my phone. Dead. Not just no signal. Dead. Black screen, no power. It had been at 80% when I lay down. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just backed up slowly, eyes on that spot behind the birch, heart hammering, cold air slicing into my skin. I reached the van, shut the sliding door, and locked every latch. The hum faded. The smell didn't. I didn't sleep. Not a second. In the morning, everything was normal. Phone worked. Batteries worked. No smell. No figure. But where the figure had been, there were tracks. Not boots. Not hooves. Bare feet. One set. Small. Pressed deep into the earth like someone had stood there a long, long time. I left Colwood and didn't look back. At this point, I should have turned around. But I didn't, because some part of me needed to know. Needed to face it. Whatever it was. The next night I stayed near Munising, close to pictured rocks. Figured sticking to the main tourist routes might be safer. I found a primitive site not far off County Road H58. It was tucked in the trees, no cell service, but legal. I parked, made a small fire, and tried to shake the feeling that I was being watched. That night, the temperature dropped again. I was getting used to that. But around 2:30 a.m., I woke to a tap. Soft, deliberate, not wind, not debris. Tap, tap, tap. From the side of the van, I didn't move. I barely breathed. Tap, tap. Silence. I reached for the curtain, hands shaking, and pulled it back just a crack. Nothing. Then the driver's side door handle jiggled. Not hard, not frantic, just a quiet test, like someone trying to see if I forgot to lock it. That's when I made a mistake. I whispered, "Who's there?" The moment the words left my mouth, something responded. Not in words, in sound, a rasp, like an exhale pulled through gravel. Right up against the glass, I lunged forward and hit the horn. The van screamed into the woods. I turned the key. Engine roared. I peeled out onto the gravel road, dust kicking up behind me like smoke from a fire. I drove for miles. Didn't stop until I saw a Shell station near Marquette. Parked under the lights. Sat in the driver's seat for 2 hours, just staring. When I finally got out, I saw it. On the side window. A smudge, like the oil from someone's cheek pressed against glass. But that wasn't the worst part. Beneath the smudge was a word, written in the condensation. One word. In tiny, childish letters. Stay. I didn't go back to sleep after that. I couldn't. I sat in the Shell station parking lot with the engine running, every light inside the VW turned on, the smell of burnt coffee drifting out of a plastic cup in the console. I stared at that word on the window, stay, as if maybe it would vanish the longer I looked, like maybe it had never been there, like maybe sleep deprivation was playing tricks on me, but it didn't vanish. When I finally had the nerve to wipe it away, it smeared like fresh grease. Something real. Something placed. It wasn't just fear. It was knowing. Knowing that someone or something had gotten that close to me. Close enough to press their face to the glass and watch me sleep. Close enough to leave a message. I cleaned the window, poured water over my face at the gas station sink, and tried to tell myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was kids, maybe it was some elaborate prank, or some unhinged forest loner playing games with campers. But deep down, I knew better. Because in that moment, there hadn't been footsteps. No crunch of gravel, no creaking metal, just a presence and a cold silence that felt older than I could explain. I should have gone home, but I didn't. Instead, I drove west toward the Porcupine Mountains. Another place that had always felt sacred to me. Big trees, quiet trails, and that raw, unfiltered connection to nature that most people forget exists. I told myself I needed closure, that I needed to finish what I'd started. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid to stop moving. I stayed in a paid campsite that night. Union Bay. Populated, loud, kids laughing, radios playing tinny country songs through cheap speakers. I hated it. But for once, the noise made me feel safe. Nothing happened that night. No knocking, no humming, no strange smells. It was almost disappointing. Almost. Because the next day, I met the man in the black truck. I was refilling my water at a pump station when I saw it, a beat-up, matte black F-150 parked 2 rows away from the VW. No plates, just mud-caked wheels and windows too dark to see inside. It wasn't until I walked past it that the driver's side window rolled down, slow and silent. The man inside was in his 60s, maybe older. Long gray beard, skin tanned like leather, eyes that didn't blink often enough. He looked at me for a long time before he spoke. "You saw it, didn't you?" I froze. "I don't know what you mean." He smiled, not warmly. "You're in the van. I saw you near Coalwood. Heard your engine before I ever saw the lights." I wanted to walk away, but something in his voice kept me rooted. It wasn't threat. It was certainty. "What did I see?" I asked. He leaned closer, just far enough for the sun to hit his face. His eyes were dead blue. "Whatever it is, it's not new. I've been running from it for 20 years. I laughed. Dry, defensive. But he didn't. "You think this is funny? People vanish out there. Not once a year, every few months. Hunters, hikers, campers. Nobody talks about it because there's no blood, no screams, just nothing. 1 minute they're roasting marshmallows, the next, gone." I opened my mouth to say something but he raised a finger. "It likes new people. Outsiders. It watches, waits, picks the ones that don't listen." "Listen to what?" I asked. "To the forest." I wanted to ask more, but he rolled up the window and drove off, gravel spitting from his tires, his truck disappearing into the trees like a ghost swallowing its own tracks. That night, I parked near Lake of the Clouds. I didn't tell anyone where I was, didn't post on social. I didn't even text my sister. who'd asked me earlier that week to check in every night just in case. Just in case. Funny how those words don't mean much until they mean everything. The sun dipped behind the trees in slow motion. Everything turned blue and gold. I built a fire, boiled water for tea, sat on a rock, and tried to feel normal. But the quiet felt wrong. Not peaceful. Hollow. Like something had sucked all the life out of the air, leaving only the echo of what used to be. That's when I noticed the deer, standing 20 feet away, just past the firelight. Not grazing, not blinking. Just standing. Its eyes reflected the flames like two hot coals embedded in bone. It didn't move. Not when I waved, not when I tossed a rock in its direction. It just stood there. Then it opened its mouth, and what came out wasn't a bleat or a grunt or anything that should have come out of an animal's throat. It was my name, spoken exactly how my ex-wife used to say it when she was angry. Not screamed, whispered, precise. Eli. My legs didn't move. My breath caught somewhere between fear and confusion. Eli, it said again, this time with a crooked tilt of its head as if trying on the syllables like a borrowed coat. Then, without another sound, it turned and vanished into the woods. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the VW with the keys in the ignition, door locked, hands clenched in my lap, staring into the tree line, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. But I heard something else. Just before dawn, as the sky turned ash gray, I heard footsteps, soft, bare, moving around the van. Then the sound of someone running their fingers along the metal. Not scratching, petting. Like the van was a pet or a thing to be owned. I didn't move, not even when I felt the pressure of someone leaning against the sliding door. And then a voice, not loud, not deep. Just above the sound of wind. I told you to stay. When the sun finally rose, it was like someone turning on the lights in a room you didn't realize was pitch black. I stepped out of the van, every joint stiff from fear and stillness. I looked around. No footprints, no disturbed leaves, no sign that anything or anyone had been there the night before. But I could feel it, in the air, that same pressure, that same invisible presence clinging to everything like dew. I didn't brush my teeth, didn't make coffee. I just drove. I headed south, taking the long way back down toward Traverse City. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd swing through, maybe find a populated site, something with kids and retirees and friendly RVers who thought ghost stories were just marshmallow talk. But deep down, I think I already knew. This thing had followed me. And it wasn't just in the trees anymore. It was in me. It was mid-afternoon when I pulled into a place called Torch River Campground, a small private spot tucked away between two lakes near the bottom edge of the state. Gravel loops, plastic playground, American flags drooping on rusted poles. Safe, right? I got a site near the edge. Close enough to hear other campers, but far enough from the office that I could pretend I was still roughing it. There were people everywhere, kids on bikes, dogs barking, the sizzle of burgers from a nearby grill, and for the first time in days, I felt something like normal. Like maybe the thing that had haunted the Upper Peninsula didn't cross bridges. Maybe it couldn't survive in the hum of small-town life. That feeling lasted until 3:12 a.m. I woke up because the van was moving. Not a lot, just a gentle sway. Back and forth, like someone pushing it from the rear bumper. I sat up fast, heart spiking, eyes wide. Then came the whispering. Not words, not in English at least, just a pattern of breaths and sibilants like wind twisting through broken glass. It circled the van, low, deliberate, calculated. And then tap, 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 3 soft knocks from underneath. I scrambled to the front seat, turned the key, nothing. Dead. The battery had been fine the day before, no warning signs, no sputtering, just nothing. The lights inside the van dimmed. That's when I saw it, a face, pressed to the rear window, upside down like someone hanging from the roof, staring in. Pale, expressionless, eyes open too wide, mouth slack and trembling. No sound, just breath fogging the glass. I screamed, and it smiled. Not a grin, not even a smirk, just a slow, creeping shift of the mouth, a signal that said, "I've been here longer than you think." Then it was gone. When I stumbled out, flashlight in hand, nothing was there. The night was still. Crickets chirping, a breeze in the trees, the neighbors' lanterns still burning gently through their nylon tents. I told the camp manager the next morning that someone had been messing with my van. He looked at me, eyes suddenly hard. "You're in Site 43, right?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly, then muttered under his breath, "It always starts there." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a small laminated map and said, "If you're smart, you'll take the main road out and don't stop until you hit the highway. And whatever you do, don't look back after you pass the guardrail." I didn't ask why. I just left. I drove for hours that day, heading toward the thumb of Michigan, somewhere no one really goes unless they're from there. I didn't care anymore. I just needed somewhere empty, somewhere the trees didn't listen so closely. That's how I ended up near Port Crescent on the edge of Lake Huron. A sandy, windswept spit of land with empty lots and silent dunes. The lake looked like an ocean, endless, gray. I parked by the water. I didn't bother unpacking. The air smelled clean, no rot, no iron, no watching. But I couldn't sleep. I stayed up, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other, a stupid, dull thing I'd bought in college and never sharpened. Just holding it made me feel like I had some kind of control. But control was long gone. It was just past midnight when I saw the lights. Faint, flickering, moving down the shoreline. 4 of them, maybe 5, like lanterns swinging low. At first, I thought it was a group of night hikers or kids playing a prank. Then they stopped, every single one, at the exact same time, perfectly still. And then slowly they began to rise. Not like someone lifting a flashlight, not like anything held by human hands. They floated up, straight up, 10 feet, 20, until they hovered just above the crest of the dunes. And that's when they turned, not the lights, but the things behind them. Silhouettes, human-shaped, thin, wrong. Their heads turned toward me, not with curiosity, but like they already knew me, like I had been chosen. I turned the ignition. This time, the van started. I floored it. Sand kicked up, tires screamed, and the VW bucked like it didn't want to leave. I didn't look back. Not once. Not even when I passed the guardrail near the Torch River campground an hour later. The same one the manager had warned me about. I felt something waiting there. A pressure behind my eyes. A tremor in my chest. But I didn't turn around. I kept driving. All the way back to Grand Rapids. When I got home, I parked the van behind the apartment complex and didn't go near it for 3 days. Not until I heard the soft hum again, the one I'd first heard near Ludington. It wasn't loud, just enough to let me know the van remembered. It took me a full week to go back inside the van. I tried to live normally, ate cereal, went on walks, sat on the couch for hours, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, pretending that nothing had followed me home. But I didn't sleep well. Every night the hum returned, quiet at first, like someone singing through a mouthful of dirt. Always around 2:30 a.m., always coming from the van. The walls in my apartment felt thinner. The lights flickered more often. I told myself it was the wiring. I told myself it was in my head. But I never quite believed it. Because sometimes when I passed the window, I'd see footprints in the dew on the grass. Bare, wide, human-shaped, but too long. Sometimes the door to the van would be cracked open, even though I kept it locked. And once, just once, I swear I saw the same face again, in the rearview mirror, in the second it took me to turn away. That's when I knew this wasn't about camping anymore. This wasn't even about the van. It was about me. About something I had awakened out there in the woods. Something I had agreed to without knowing it. That last night in Michigan, when the fire had died low and the deer had spoken my name, I hadn't just seen something I wasn't supposed to see. I had heard it, and in hearing it, something in me had changed. Maybe that's how it works. Maybe these places don't want your body. Maybe they want your attention, your fear, your belief. So when I finally stepped into the van again, it wasn't to camp. It was to listen. The smell inside was different. Not mold or sweat or damp fabric, but something metallic and ancient, like the dust in a church that hasn't been opened in years. I sat in the driver's seat, closed the door, and waited. I didn't know what I expected. But I didn't expect the silence. No hum, no knocking, just a stillness so heavy it felt alive. And then I heard it, faint, not from the speakers, from behind the walls of the van. A voice low and breathy. You should have stayed. The lights flickered once. The air thickened. And I whispered back, why me? There was a pause. Then something like a memory flashed through me. Not mine. Not exactly. A feeling of hunger, of being trapped, of thousands of years of waiting. Not for food, not for blood, for company, for acknowledgement. It hit me like a punch. The entity, whatever it was, didn't haunt the forest. It was the forest. The silence between branches, the breath in the dead leaves, the rhythm in the creaking wood and shifting sand. People vanish, not because it wants them gone, but because it wants them to understand something no sane person is meant to know. The woods are watching, always have been, and sometimes they choose you to see them as they are. I sat there for hours, letting that knowledge sink in, letting the cold crawl up my legs like moss. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. I felt seen. When I finally got out, I locked the van, walked back into the apartment, and slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but without interruption. The dreams that came were different, not nightmares, not quite. I dreamed of trees cracking open like ribs, of roots curling like fingers, of a voice older than the sky whispering truths that felt like poems and threats at once. But the next day, I woke up with a decision. I put the van up for sale. It sold in 3 hours. Some college kid from Ann Arbor who said he wanted to hit all the state parks before fall. I didn't warn him. What would I say? Watch out for the thing in the fog. Don't listen when the deer starts talking. No one believes you until it's too late. And piss, I've since moved west to Utah. Different kind of wilderness out here. Dry, silent in its own way. Less green, more red. The rocks don't whisper like the trees did, but they watch just the same. And I still camp, still sleep in tents under the stars, still chase that connection I first found in my 20s when I bought that VW and thought the world was something you could contain with a camp stove and a road map. But I do things differently now. I don't stay in one spot too long. I don't ignore the little things. A change in the wind, a call that sounds too human, a shape standing too still in the distance. And I never ever camp near coal black water. Not because I'm afraid, but because I remember. I remember what it felt like to be chosen. Not out of malice, not even out of hunger, but out of curiosity. That's what no one tells you about the woods. They aren't just wild. They're alive. And sometimes they want to know you. So if you're out there chasing that dream of freedom on 4 wheels, parking your Volkswagen beneath the stars, just remember the woods don't care what you believe. They only care that you listen. Because once they see you, really see you, they never look away. Not entirely, not forever. And the quiet, it's never just quiet. Not in Michigan, not where the trees still whisper your name.